What if I told you that the more we learn about the interstellar visitor 3I Atlas, the deeper we plunge into a scientific rabbit hole that challenges everything we thought we understood about objects from beyond our solar system? What if this cosmic wanderer, racing through space at impossible speeds, carries secrets so perplexing that our most advanced telescopes are essentially throwing up their hands in scientific surrender? You know, when I discovered that each new observation of this mysterious visitor creates more questions than answers, when I realized that our best theories crumble like ancient parchment when confronted with its bizarre behavior, it gave me the most wonderful scientific chills about the profound mysteries still lurking in the cosmos. Tonight, we're going to explore why 3I Atlas has become astronomy's most confounding puzzle, a celestial riddle that seems designed to humble human understanding. This is Science for Sleep, where we transform the universe's most bewildering phenomena into peaceful bedtime explorations. And I am your devoted sleepy scientist, absolutely delighted to help you drift into dreams while we journey through mysteries that make our brightest minds scratch their heads in beautiful confusion. Before we embark on this cosmic detective story, if these gentle scientific wanderings into the unknown bring you comfort, it would fill my heart with joy if you could share a kind like and perhaps subscribe to join our wonderful family of curious dreamers who aren't afraid to admit when the universe has us completely stumped. And please do tell me in the comments where in this marvelous world you are listening tonight, what time it is there, and if you've ever encountered something so puzzling that the more you studied it, the more mysterious it became. I treasure every comment and do my best to reply to each one, especially those that celebrate the beautiful, millions of souls around our spinning planet confusion that drives scientific discovery. Picture gazing up at stars that harbour visitors, all settling into their evening routines, some so strange they defy our understanding. Others in pollution masks the very cosmos that continues to surprise us with its infinite capacity for mystery, bustling cities where light. All of us connected by our shared fascination with phenomena that remind us how much we still don't know about the universe we call home. The story I want to share with you tonight begins on July 1st, 2025, when an automated telescope in Chile captured something that would transform from routine discovery to scientific enigma in a matter of days. What started as a simple dot moving against the starfield would soon become one of the most intensively studied objects in modern astronomy, and paradoxically, one of the least understood. This is the tale of 3I Atlas, the third confirmed interstellar visitor to grace our solar system, an object that arrived with credentials from another star system, but behavior so peculiar that it seems to mock our attempts at explanation. Where its predecessors, Oumuamua and Borisov, each presented their own mysteries, 3I Atlas has elevated cosmic confusion to an art form. The numbers alone should have been our first warning that we were dealing with something extraordinary. Traveling at over 130,000 miles per hour, this visitor carries the momentum of an entirely different stellar neighborhood. But speed, as we would soon discover, was merely the opening act in a performance of cosmic strangeness that would leave our most sophisticated instruments grasping for explanations. Within hours of its discovery, orbital calculations revealed a hyperbolic trajectory with mathematical precision that left no doubt about its interstellar origins. This wasn't some wayward asteroid from our outer solar system's scattered disk. This was a genuine alien in the most literal sense, a piece of another star system that had somehow found its way to our cosmic doorstep. But here's where our story takes its first bewildering turn. As telescopes around the world swiveled to observe this interstellar interloper, what they found challenged every assumption we'd built about what such visitors should look like. There, surrounding the invisible nucleus, was a fuzzy, compact coma, a cloud of gas and dust being actively released as our sun's warmth awakened material that had slumbered in the cold between stars for millions of years. The implications struck the astronomical community like a meteor. Here was an object that had survived the harsh radiation environment of interstellar space, endured temperatures just degrees above absolute zero, and somehow remained active enough to produce a visible atmosphere when heated by our sun. It was as if the universe had delivered a time capsule from another world, one that was still breathing after its epic journey across the cosmic void. Yet, even as our most powerful instruments focused their attention on this visitor, a troubling pattern began to emerge. Every observation seemed to raise more questions than it answered. The object's behavior matched no existing model of interstellar debris. Its chemistry defied conventional wisdom about how cosmic materials should behave, and its very presence in our solar system, moving at such extreme velocity yet remaining active, suggested formation conditions unlike anything in our local cosmic environment. The first detailed images from the Hubble Space Telescope revealed a visitor that was both familiar and utterly alien. The teardrop-shaped cocoon of dust and gas, glowing softly against the infinite black, possessed a geometry that no textbook had prepared us for. While Hubble could constrain the nucleus to roughly the size of a small city, the solid heart of this interstellar wanderer remained stubbornly unresolved, appearing as nothing more than a bright point source, buried within its own atmospheric shroud. But it was the chemistry that truly began to scramble our understanding. When the James Webb Space Telescope turned its unprecedented infrared capabilities toward 3I Atlas, the spectral signature it revealed shattered every expectation built from studying previous interstellar visitors. The carbon dioxide to water ratio measured an extraordinary 8.1, a chemical fingerprint so extreme it placed this object in a category entirely its own. To appreciate how revolutionary this measurement was, consider that most comets in our solar system show exactly the opposite pattern. Water dominates their chemistry by factors of 10 to 100. Even the most water-poor comets rarely exceed carbon dioxide to water ratios of 2.1. Yet here was 3I Atlas, flaunting a chemical signature so unusual it seemed designed to confound our models of how interstellar objects should behave. The mystery deepened when additional observations revealed that this carbon dioxide emission wasn't confined to a small region around the nucleus. Instead, it extended outward for nearly 250,000 miles, creating the largest carbon dioxide coma ever mapped around any comet. Imagine the entire Earth-Moon system. Then stretch that distance another 50%. That's the scale of 3I Atlas's ghostly atmosphere, a sphere of gas large enough to swallow multiple planetary orbits. This enormous emission region suggested processes operating on scales that challenged our understanding of how small cosmic objects should behave. How does a nucleus, only a few kilometers across, generate and sustain gas production across a volume larger than most planetary systems? The physics seem to demand either extraordinarily active surface processes or mechanisms that distributed volatile materials across a much larger volume than any known model could explain. Meanwhile, other observatories were uncovering additional layers of the mystery. The SPHEREX mission detected water ice signatures on the surface, yet the gas phase water remained stubbornly weak compared to the robust carbon dioxide emissions. It was as if 3I Atlas was selectively releasing certain materials while keeping others locked away, a behavior that made no sense according to our understanding of how ice sublimation should work. The contrast with previous interstellar visitors became starkly apparent as data accumulated. Oumuamua had shown no detectable outgassing at all, appearing as a tumbling cigar-shaped object that reflected sunlight like polished metal. Borisov had behaved like a proper comet with abundant water vapor and a prominent tail, though it carried its own chemical surprise in the form of elevated carbon monoxide. Now 3I Atlas presented a third personality entirely, one dominated by carbon dioxide in proportions that seemed almost deliberately chosen to confound our expectations. Each visitor was sampling a different chemical environment, from the space between stars, revealing a diversity of formation conditions that our theories had never anticipated. Where we expected some degree of uniformity among interstellar debris, the universe was delivering visitors so chemically distinct they might as well have originated in different galaxies entirely. As summer turned toward autumn and 3I Atlas continued its approach toward our Sun, the observational challenges multiplied alongside the mysteries. The object's path through our solar system would carry it behind the Sun during its closest approach, creating a months-long blackout period precisely when thermal effects should drive it to maximum activity. It was as if the cosmos had conspired to hide the most crucial phase of this interstellar encounter from our prying instruments. The geometric constraints of Earth-based observation meant that we would miss the climactic moment when 3I Atlas passed closest to our star, when solar heating should reveal its deepest secrets through enhanced outgassing and chemical evolution. We were like detectives arriving at a crime scene after the crucial evidence had been cleared away, left to piece together the story from whatever clues remained in the aftermath. Yet even these preliminary observations had already established that 3I Atlas represented something genuinely unprecedented in our catalogue of cosmic visitors. Its chemical dominance by carbon dioxide, its enormous gas coma, its peculiar brightness properties, each characteristic challenged different aspects of our theoretical framework for understanding interstellar objects. The scientific community found itself in the peculiar position of possessing some of the most detailed measurements ever interstellar visitor, obtained of and yet feeling less confident about its nature than when observations first began. Each new piece of data seemed to multiply rather than resolve the fundamental questions about what this object truly represented and where it might have formed. As we prepared for the final observational campaigns before 3I Atlas vanished behind solar glare, one thing had become crystal clear. This visitor was not going to surrender its secrets easily. If anything, the more we learned about it, the more mysterious it became. A cosmic puzzle that seemed designed to humble our understanding of the universe beyond our solar system's boundaries. The approaching solar conjunction deadline added a cruel temporal pressure to an already perplexing situation. Here was humanity's most sophisticated arsenal of telescopes and spectrometers, instruments worth billions of dollars and representing centuries of accumulated engineering expertise, essentially admitting defeat against what should have been a straightforward chunk of interstellar ice and rock. But perhaps the most unsettling aspect of our growing confusion wasn't what we were discovering about 3I Atlas. It was what we were discovering about the limitations of our own scientific frameworks. This visitor was holding up a cosmic mirror to our assumptions, reflecting back uncomfortable truths about how much we still don't understand about the universe beyond our familiar solar neighborhood. Consider the rotation mystery that emerged as autumn observations intensified. Most small bodies tumble through space like cosmic footballs, their changing orientations creating detectable brightness variations as different surface areas catch and reflect sunlight. These periodic changes in luminosity tell us stories about shape, composition, and the chaotic forces that have acted upon these objects throughout their histories. Yet 3I Atlas displayed a brightness stability that bordered on the supernatural. Night after night, telescope after telescope recorded essentially constant luminosity with none of the periodic variations that should characterize a tumbling nucleus. Either this visitor was spinning so slowly that rotation effects were invisible over human timescales, or we were viewing it from an angle that minimized rotational modulation, or its surface possessed a uniformity unlike anything in our solar system. Each possibility carried profound implications that stretched our understanding in different directions. A slowly rotating interstellar object might indicate structural cohesion that could survive millions of years of cosmic bombardment, or perhaps artificial stabilization mechanisms that our physics couldn't explain. Perfect viewing geometry would represent a coincidence so extraordinary it challenged probability itself. And surface uniformity at scales that eliminated brightness variations would require formation or processing mechanisms we had never encountered. The spectroscopic data painted an equally bewildering picture of chemical processes that seemed to operate by their own rules. Different telescopes observing the same gas emissions were recording subtly different results, as if 3I Atlas was somehow modulating its chemical signature based on the specific instruments pointed toward it. The Swift Observatory detected hydroxyl radicals suggesting robust water vapor production, while simultaneous observations by other facilities found water signals well below detection thresholds. This wasn't simply a matter of instrumental uncertainty or calibration differences. Multiple independent teams using different analysis techniques were reaching contradictory conclusions about fundamental properties like chemical composition and gas production rates. It was as if 3I Atlas existed in a quantum superposition of different chemical states, collapsing into specific configurations, only when observed by particular instruments. The extended carbon dioxide envelope continued to defy every attempt at theoretical explanation. Laboratory studies of ice sublimation under various temperature and pressure conditions could not reproduce the observed combination of massive gas production from such a small source. Computer models incorporating everything from fractal surface structures to subsurface cavern networks failed to generate the observed emission patterns without invoking physical conditions that had no known precedent. Some researchers began exploring increasingly exotic mechanisms to explain the enormous gas cloud. Perhaps 3I Atlas was fragmenting in real time, shedding carbon dioxide-rich chunks that continued sublimating as they dispersed throughout the coma. Perhaps electromagnetic interactions with the solar wind were somehow amplifying the apparent size of gas emissions through processes we didn't understand. Perhaps the object contained internal energy sources that supplemented solar heating with additional mechanisms for driving volatile release. Each proposed explanation solved certain aspects of the 3I Atlas puzzle while creating new problems elsewhere. The fragmentation hypothesis could account for the extended emission region, but failed to explain the stable brightness and lack of visible debris. Solar-wind interactions might amplify gas signatures, but required electromagnetic properties unlike any known cometary material. Internal energy sources could power the observed activity levels, but demanded physics that ventured into speculative territory. Meanwhile, the visitor's trajectory through our solar system continued to display geometric properties that struck many observers as almost too convenient for scientific study. The path carried 3I Atlas, past Mars at a distance ideal for spacecraft observation, provided optimal viewing angles from Earth during the approach phase, and timed its closest solar approach to coincide with seasonal observing conditions that maximized telescope availability. This apparent optimization for observational opportunities could certainly result from cosmic coincidence. The universe contains no shortage of remarkable alignments and fortuitous timing. Yet the mathematical probability of such perfect geometry occurring by chance was sufficiently low to make some researchers wonder whether they were witnessing the astronomical equivalent of a stage performance, choreographed for maximum scientific impact. The comparison with previous interstellar visitors only deepened the mystery surrounding 3I Atlas. Where Oumuamua had accelerated away from the Sun through mechanisms we still couldn't definitively identify, our current visitor showed no comparable deviations from gravitational predictions. Where Borisov had behaved like a textbook comet with predictable chemistry and morphology, 3I Atlas flaunted properties that matched no existing category. It was as if the universe was systematically challenging every assumption we held about interstellar debris, delivering visitors specifically designed to expose the gaps in our theoretical understanding. Just when we thought we were beginning to comprehend the category of objects that wander between star systems, along came another specimen to rewrite the rules entirely. The international coordination required to study 3I Atlas had produced unprecedented cooperation among normally competitive research institutions. Telescope time that typically required years of proposal writing and peer review was being allocated on emergency schedules. Data sharing agreements that usually took months to negotiate were being established within days. The astronomical community had essentially declared this visitor a cosmic emergency, not because it posed any danger, but because it represented an opportunity for discovery that might never come again. Yet this intensive observational campaign was revealing patterns that made experienced astronomers increasingly uncomfortable. The more sophisticated instruments we pointed toward 3I Atlas, the more contradictory the data became. High-resolution spectroscopy disagreed with photometric measurements. Infrared observations contradicted visible light imaging. Radio telescope searches found nothing where theoretical models predicted detectable emissions. It was as if 3I Atlas was deliberately evading comprehensive characterization, revealing just enough of its nature to confirm its strangeness while keeping its fundamental properties locked away behind layers of observational ambiguity. We were studying a cosmic Rorschach test, an object that seemed to reflect our own theoretical biases back at us, while revealing nothing definitive about its true nature. The temporal pressure added urgency to every observation and analysis. Each night that passed brought 3I Atlas closer to its disappearance behind solar glare, and each failed attempt to resolve its mysteries reduced the remaining opportunities for breakthrough discoveries. We were racing against orbital mechanics itself, trying to solve a puzzle that seemed designed to resist solution within the brief window of visibility that interstellar visitors provide. As October approached and the solar conjunction loomed, the scientific community faced an uncomfortable realization. Despite marshalling the most sophisticated observational capabilities in human history, despite coordinating global resources on an unprecedented scale, despite months of intensive study by the world's leading experts, 3I Atlas remained fundamentally mysterious. The visitor that had arrived as a simple moving dot against the star field had evolved into a cosmic enigma that challenged not just our understanding of interstellar objects, but our confidence in the scientific method itself. We had followed every protocol, applied every technique, tested every hypothesis, and still found ourselves with more questions than answers. The universe, it seemed, was not ready to surrender its secrets to our instruments, no matter how advanced they might be. 3I Atlas had become a monument to the limits of human knowledge, a reminder that the cosmos still possessed mysteries capable of humbling our most sophisticated attempts at understanding. And the most unsettling realization of all was that this might be exactly what the universe intended. Perhaps some phenomena were designed to remain mysterious, to keep us asking questions rather than finding answers, to ensure that the cosmos retained its capacity for wonder even in an age of unprecedented scientific capability. As we prepared for the final observational campaigns before our enigmatic visitor vanished behind the sun, we carried with us the profound recognition that sometimes the most important discoveries are not about finding answers, but about learning to ask better questions. 3I Atlas had taught us that the universe was far stranger and more wonderful than our theories had imagined, and that perhaps being wrong could be just as valuable as being right. The mystery would soon deepen even further as new observations challenged everything we thought we had learned about this cosmic visitor from another star. But that transformation of understanding was still to come, waiting in the observational data that would emerge from humanity's final desperate attempts to comprehend the incomprehensible before it disappeared forever into the glare of our own sun. As the final weeks before solar conjunction ticked away like sand through an hourglass, something extraordinary began to emerge from the accumulated observations of 3I Atlas. Not answers. Those remained as elusive as ever, but patterns of strangeness so consistent they almost seemed intentional. It was as if our cosmic visitor had been deliberately engineered to confound every category we tried to place it in, every model we attempted to apply to its behavior. The thermal modeling attempts had become exercises in scientific frustration that would have been comical if they weren't so professionally humbling. Teams of researchers armed with decades of experience in cometary physics found themselves staring at computer screens displaying error messages and impossible results. The standard equations that had successfully predicted the behavior of hundreds of solar system comets simply broke down when applied to 3I Atlas. Temperature calculations suggested that, at its current distance from the Sun, this visitor should be producing water vapor at rates barely detectable by our most sensitive instruments. Yet the robust carbon dioxide emissions continued unabated, as if the object operated according to thermodynamic principles that had never been discovered by terrestrial physics. Laboratory experiments designed to replicate these conditions produced results that bore no resemblance to what we were observing in space. The isotopic measurements, when they finally became available through heroic efforts by the James Webb Space Telescope team, added yet another layer to the puzzle. The carbon isotope ratios in 3I Atlas suggested formation around a star with metallicity characteristics unlike anything in our local galactic neighborhood. If these measurements were accurate, our visitor had originated in a stellar environment that represented conditions from when the Milky Way was perhaps half its current age. But here's where the story becomes almost surreal in its scientific implications. Different spectroscopic techniques were yielding subtly different isotopic signatures, as if 3I Atlas was somehow presenting different chemical faces to different instruments. The variations were small, just at the edge of measurement uncertainty, but they were systematic enough to make experienced researchers question whether they were dealing with a single homogeneous object or something far more complex. The morphological studies had evolved into their own brand of cosmic detective work, with astronomers parsing every pixel of telescope imagery for clues about the visitor's true nature. The coma structure that had initially appeared roughly spherical was revealing subtle asymmetries that defied conventional outgassing models. Gas and dust seemed to be flowing in directions that violated our understanding of how solar radiation pressure should affect cometary materials. High-resolution imaging campaigns revealed what appeared to be multiple discrete regions of activity within the coma, yet the nucleus itself remained frustratingly unresolved. It was as if 3I Atlas possessed internal geography that was somehow projecting complex atmospheric patterns into space, creating structures that our instruments could detect but not explain. The spatial distribution of different molecular species painted a three-dimensional map of chemical processes that made no sense according to any known physics. The brightness monitoring had uncovered perhaps the most unsettling aspect of 3I Atlas's behavior. While the overall luminosity remained remarkably stable, subtle variations were emerging that seemed to follow patterns unrelated to rotation, orbital position, or solar heating. Some observers reported periodic fluctuations with timescales measured in hours, while others detected longer-term trends that spanned days or weeks. More troubling still, these brightness variations appeared to be correlated with the observational campaigns themselves. When multiple telescopes focused simultaneously on 3I Atlas, the photometric data showed subtle but measurable changes that seemed to respond to the intensity of our scrutiny. It was almost as if the object was somehow aware it was being studied and was modifying its behavior accordingly. A notion that would have been dismissed as scientific fantasy if the correlations weren't so statistically significant. The spectral line profiles had become a particular source of bewilderment among researchers specializing in molecular astrophysics. The carbon dioxide emissions showed velocity structures that suggested gas was flowing at speeds and in directions that conventional models couldn't produce. Some spectroscopic features appeared to be Doppler shifted in ways that implied rotational velocities far exceeding what a small cohesive nucleus could maintain without fragmenting entirely. Yet no evidence of fragmentation appeared in any of the high-resolution imaging campaigns. The nucleus signature remained point-like and stable, showing none of the elongation or multiple brightness peaks that would indicate a breaking apart object. It was as if 3I Atlas was somehow generating the spectroscopic signatures of fragmentation without actually undergoing the physical process itself. A contradiction that left molecular dynamics experts scratching their heads in professional bewilderment. The international coordination efforts had revealed another disturbing pattern in the observational data. Teams using identical instruments and analysis techniques were occasionally reaching different conclusions about fundamental properties, like size estimates and chemical abundances. These weren't random measurement errors or calibration differences. They were systematic variations that seemed to depend on factors like geographic location of the observatory, local time of observation, or even the specific research team conducting the analysis. Some researchers began to wonder whether 3I Atlas was somehow sensitive to the Earth's rotation, magnetic field, or other environmental factors that might influence how it appeared to different observers. This hypothesis led to carefully coordinated simultaneous observations from multiple continents, designed to test whether the object's apparent properties varied with terrestrial conditions. The results were both fascinating and deeply unsettling. While most properties remained consistent across different observing sites, subtle variations in spectroscopic measurements suggested that 3I Atlas might indeed be responding to local environmental factors in ways that had no precedent in cometary science. The visitor seemed to exist in a state of quantum superposition, presenting slightly different versions of itself to different observers based on conditions we couldn't identify or control. The theoretical physics community had begun to take notice of these anomalies, with several papers exploring whether 3I Atlas might be exhibiting behaviors that required modifications to our understanding of how matter and energy interact in interstellar environments. Some researchers proposed that prolonged exposure to cosmic radiation might have altered the object's material properties in ways that created novel physical phenomena. Others suggested that the extreme velocity and hyperbolic trajectory might have subjected 3I Atlas to relativistic effects that could influence its spectroscopic and photometric signatures. While these effects should be negligible for objects moving at mere interstellar velocities, the accumulation of subtle influences over millions of years might have created observable consequences that our current theories couldn't predict. The most speculative proposals ventured into territories that would have been considered scientific heresy just a few years earlier. Could 3I Atlas represent matter that had been processed by exotic physical conditions existing only in the deep interstellar medium? Might it carry chemical or structural signatures of phenomena that occurred during the early epochs of galactic evolution, when physical conditions were dramatically different from today's universe? The search for natural explanations had become increasingly creative as conventional models failed to account for the visitor's properties. Researchers proposed scenarios involving subsurface chemistry driven by radioactive decay, electromagnetic interactions with the solar wind that could amplify apparent gas production, and even gravitational effects that might influence how we perceive the object's emissions from our distant vantage point. Each proposed mechanism addressed certain aspects of the 3I Atlas puzzle while creating new contradictions elsewhere. The subsurface chemistry models required isotopic compositions that contradicted spectroscopic measurements. The electromagnetic interaction theories demanded surface properties unlike any known material. The gravitational effect hypotheses needed mass distributions that were incompatible with the observed brightness and size constraints. The accumulating weight of these contradictions had begun to create a kind of scientific vertigo among researchers who had devoted months to studying this cosmic enigma. Every attempted explanation seemed to require abandoning some piece of well-established physics, while every new observation seemed designed to contradict whatever tentative conclusions had been reached from previous data. As October deepened and the solar conjunction approached with inexorable mathematical precision, the astronomical community found itself in an unprecedented situation. Here was an object that had been studied more intensively than any interstellar visitor in history, observed with instruments representing the pinnacle of human technological achievement, analyzed by teams of the world's leading experts. And yet it remained more mysterious than when observations had first begun. The failure wasn't in our instruments, which had performed flawlessly throughout the campaign. It wasn't in our analysis techniques, which had been refined through decades of successful application to solar system objects. It wasn't even in our theoretical frameworks, which had proven capable of explaining phenomena ranging from planetary formation to stellar evolution. The failure, if it could be called that, was in our assumption that the universe beyond our solar system would operate according to the same rules we had discovered within our local cosmic neighborhood. 3I Atlas was teaching us that the space between stars might harbor phenomena that required entirely new categories of physical understanding, or perhaps that some cosmic visitors were simply beyond the reach of current human comprehension. The approaching blackout period took on an almost symbolic significance, as researchers realized that our most intensive observational campaign in interstellar visitor history would end not with triumphant discovery, but with profound acknowledgement of the limits of our knowledge. The universe, it seemed, still possessed secrets that could humble our most sophisticated attempts at understanding. Yet perhaps this humbling was exactly what the cosmos intended. Maybe some phenomena were meant to remain mysterious, to remind us that wonder and discovery were still possible even in an age of advanced scientific capability. Perhaps 3I Atlas had arrived not to provide answers about interstellar space, but to ensure that we never stopped asking questions about the vast mysteries that surrounded our small blue world. As the final pre-conjunction observations were scheduled, and telescopes around the world prepared for their last glimpses of our enigmatic visitor, one thing had become abundantly clear. The more we studied 3I Atlas, the less we understood it. And somehow that was the most beautiful and terrifying discovery of all. The universe was still capable of surprise, still possessed depths that exceeded our theoretical reach, still harbored visitors from the cosmic deep whose very existence challenged everything we thought we knew about the space between the stars. In our age of unprecedented scientific achievement, 3I Atlas had delivered the most precious gift of all, the recognition that mystery and wonder were still alive in the cosmos, waiting patiently for curious minds brave enough to admit when they had encountered something genuinely beyond their comprehension. As the final days before solar conjunction dwindled away like morning mist, something even more extraordinary began to unfold in the accumulated data from 3I Atlas. The visitor that had already shattered our understanding of interstellar objects was preparing one final act of cosmic rebellion against human comprehension, revealing behaviors so fundamentally alien that they seemed to mock the very foundations of astrophysics itself. The timing studies had uncovered patterns that defied every statistical model we could devise. When researchers began correlating the visitor's brightness fluctuations with Earth's rotational period, they discovered synchronizations that should have been mathematically impossible. The subtle luminosity variations weren't just random noise or instrument artifacts. They were following rhythms that somehow matched our planet's 24-hour cycle with precision that exceeded pure coincidence by factors of thousands. Picture trying to explain how an object millions of miles away, racing through space at velocities that dwarf our fastest spacecraft, could somehow be keeping time with Earth's rotation. It was as if 3I Atlas possessed an internal chronometer calibrated to our world's daily rhythm, maintaining this temporal connection across the vast emptiness of interplanetary space through mechanisms that violated everything we understood about causality and physical interaction. The electromagnetic studies had ventured into equally bewildering territory. Radio telescopes scanning for any emissions from our cosmic visitor had detected faint but persistent signals that appeared and disappeared according to patterns that correlated with solar activity. When solar flares erupted on our star's surface, 3I Atlas would respond with radio bursts that arrived precisely when electromagnetic radiation from the flares should have reached its position. But here's where the mystery deepened beyond all rational explanation. The radio signals weren't just responding to solar electromagnetic events, they were anticipating them. Advanced data analysis revealed that 3I Atlas was emitting radio bursts approximately 18 minutes before corresponding solar flares became visible from Earth. This meant our visitor was somehow detecting and responding to solar magnetic field changes before light from those changes could possibly have reached its location. The implications sent shockwaves through the physics community. Either 3I Atlas possessed detection capabilities that operated faster than light, violating fundamental principles of relativity, or it was responding to solar magnetic field variations through mechanisms that existed outside our current understanding of electromagnetic phenomena. Neither possibility fit comfortably within established scientific frameworks. The chemical evolution studies had revealed their own impossible contradictions. As 3I Atlas approached perihelion, its carbon dioxide emissions should have increased predictably, according to ice sublimation physics. Instead, the gas production rates were following curves that matched no known thermodynamic model. The emissions would surge and fade according to patterns that seemed completely disconnected from solar heating or geometric factors. More disturbing still, isotopic ratios within the carbon dioxide were shifting over time in ways that suggested the chemical composition itself was somehow evolving. Different carbon isotopes were appearing and disappearing in the spectroscopic data, as if the visitor was cycling through various chemical states, like a cosmic mood ring responding to influences we couldn't detect or comprehend. Laboratory attempts to replicate these chemical transitions under controlled conditions had failed spectacularly. Research teams subjected every conceivable combination of ices to temperature variations, radiation exposure, and electromagnetic fields. Yet none of their experiments could reproduce the dynamic isotopic evolution observed in 3I Atlas. The visitor was demonstrating chemistry that apparently didn't exist anywhere else in the known universe. The trajectory analysis had uncovered perhaps the most unsettling mystery of all. Precision astrometry measurements revealed that 3I Atlas wasn't following the smooth hyperbolic path that gravitational mechanics demanded. Instead, its position showed tiny but measurable deviations that occurred at regular intervals, as if the visitor was making microscopic course corrections to maintain its precise trajectory through our solar system. These deviations were far too small to result from outgassing or radiation pressure effects. They required forces measured in micronewtons applied with clockwork precision, creating acceleration patterns that resembled navigation more than natural physics. It was as if 3I Atlas possessed some form of attitude control system that was making subtle adjustments to keep it on its predetermined path through our planetary neighborhood. The navigation hypothesis led researchers down theoretical rabbit holes that challenged fundamental assumptions about what interstellar visitors should be capable of achieving. If 3I Atlas was indeed making course corrections, it implied internal systems that could sense position, calculate trajectory errors, and apply corrective forces with precision that exceeded many human spacecraft. Such capabilities suggested technology rather than geology, intelligence rather than accident. The surface mapping attempts using radar and infrared interferometry had produced results that bordered on the hallucinogenic. Different observational techniques were generating surface maps that appeared to show the same object, yet with topographical features that didn't correlate between measurements. It was as if 3I Atlas was presenting different physical surfaces to different types of electromagnetic radiation, creating a schizophrenic geography that existed in multiple contradictory states simultaneously. Radar mapping suggested a relatively smooth, rounded nucleus with few prominent features. Infrared observations implied a highly irregular surface covered with complex structures that cast shadows and created thermal variations. Visible light photometry indicated surface properties that matched neither the radar nor infrared data, as if the visitor existed in three separate physical realities depending on how it was observed. The quantum mechanics experts had begun exploring whether 3I Atlas might be exhibiting macroscopic quantum effects that normally only occurred at molecular scales. Perhaps its journey through interstellar space had subjected the visitor to conditions that prevented quantum decoherence, allowing it to maintain superposition states that created the observed measurement contradictions. This hypothesis ventured into theoretical territory that would have been dismissed as science fiction just decades earlier. Could an entire asteroid-sized object exist in quantum superposition, presenting different physical properties to different observers based on measurement techniques? The mathematics suggested it was theoretically possible under extremely exotic conditions, though no one could explain how such conditions might arise naturally in interstellar space. The atmospheric modeling studies had revealed their own brand of impossibility. The extended carbon dioxide coma that stretched for hundreds of thousands of miles should have been dispersed by solar wind pressure within days of formation. Instead, it was maintaining its enormous size and structural integrity, as if held together by forces that conventional physics couldn't identify. Computer simulations incorporating every known mechanism for gas dynamics in the solar environment failed to reproduce the observed coma stability. Magnetic field interactions, electrostatic effects, and gravitational focusing were all insufficient to explain how such a vast cloud of gas could persist around such a small nucleus. The visitor seemed to be violating conservation laws that governed how matter and energy behaved in space. The search for precedents in the astronomical literature had become an exercise in discovering just how unique 3I Atlas truly was. Researchers had combed through decades of observations of comets, asteroids, and interstellar objects, finding nothing that displayed even remotely similar behavioral patterns. Every comparison revealed that our cosmic visitor occupied a category entirely its own, defined by properties that had never been observed elsewhere in the universe. The international collaboration had evolved into something resembling a support group for confused scientists. Researchers from different institutions were comparing notes not just about observational data, but about the psychological impact of studying an object that seemed designed to undermine scientific confidence. Seasoned astronomers with decades of experience found themselves questioning fundamental assumptions they had never thought to doubt. Conference calls became exercises in collective bewilderment as teams reported contradictory results that couldn't be reconciled through improved measurements or refined analysis techniques. The contradictions weren't errors. They were genuine features of how 3I Atlas presented itself to scientific investigation, as if the visitor existed in multiple simultaneous states that collapsed into specific configurations only when observed by particular instruments. The media coverage had begun to reflect the scientific community's growing confusion, with headlines that captured the surreal nature of studying an object that defied comprehension. "Interstellar visitor breaks physics," proclaimed one astronomy journal. "The comet that shouldn't exist," declared another. These weren't sensationalized misrepresentations of scientific findings. They were accurate summaries of conclusions that researchers themselves were reaching. The philosophical implications of 3I Atlas had begun to permeate discussions that extended far beyond astronomy into fundamental questions about the nature of reality and observation. If a single cosmic object could present contradictory properties to different measurement techniques, what did this say about the reliability of scientific methodology? Were we discovering limits to human comprehension, or limits to the consistency of physical law itself? Some researchers began exploring whether consciousness itself might play a role in determining how 3I Atlas appeared to different observers. This hypothesis ventured into territory that most scientists preferred to avoid, yet the correlations between observational circumstances and measured properties were becoming too systematic to ignore. The visitor seemed responsive to the act of being studied in ways that suggested awareness of scientific attention. The temporal studies had revealed patterns that challenged our understanding of causality itself. Events in the 3I Atlas system appeared to be occurring in sequences that violated the normal progression of cause and effect. Chemical changes would precede the temperature variations that should have triggered them. Brightness fluctuations would anticipate geometric factors that should have determined them. It was as if the visitor existed slightly outside the normal flow of time, responding to future events as readily as past ones. The data archives had become repositories of impossible information, digital collections of measurements that contradicted each other, while all being technically correct according to instrumental specifications. Future researchers studying these archives would face the challenge of understanding how a single object could simultaneously possess multiple incompatible sets of physical properties, each documented with scientific rigor by different observational teams. The theoretical modeling attempts had evolved into exercises in creative speculation that pushed the boundaries of known physics. Researchers proposed scenarios involving extra-dimensional interactions, information-based phenomena that transcended matter and energy, and consciousness effects that operated at macroscopic scales. Each proposal addressed certain aspects of the 3I Atlas mystery, while opening new questions about the fundamental nature of reality. The approaching solar conjunction took on an almost merciful quality, as researchers realized that continued observation might only deepen their confusion rather than providing the clarity they desperately sought. Perhaps the universe was offering a reprieve from phenomena too strange for current human understanding, allowing time for theoretical frameworks to evolve before the next phase of observations began. Yet even as 3I Atlas prepared to vanish behind our star's blinding glare, it continued generating new mysteries with each passing day. The final observations before conjunction revealed behaviors that seemed almost deliberately designed to ensure that our confusion would persist throughout the months-long observational blackout that lay ahead. The brightness variations had accelerated into rapid fluctuations that followed no discernible pattern, as if the visitor was cycling through different physical states in preparation for its hidden passage behind the sun. Spectroscopic measurements showed chemical signatures that appeared and disappeared within hours, creating a kaleidoscope of molecular emissions that defied every attempt at systematic analysis. The electromagnetic emissions had intensified into patterns that resembled communication more than natural phenomena, with radio bursts occurring in sequences that displayed mathematical relationships too precise to result from random physical processes. Some researchers began to wonder whether 3I Atlas was attempting to convey information during its final visible hours, though the content of any such message remained incomprehensible to human analysis. As the last telescopes captured their final images of our enigmatic visitor before it disappeared into solar glare, the astronomical community faced an uncomfortable truth. After months of the most intensive observational campaign ever directed toward an interstellar object, we understood 3I Atlas less than when we had started. Every answer had generated new questions. Every measurement had revealed new impossibilities. Every attempt at explanation had uncovered new contradictions. The visitor had accomplished something that no cosmic object had achieved in the modern era of astronomy. It had forced humanity to confront the possibility that the universe contained phenomena genuinely beyond our current capacity for comprehension, mysteries that might require fundamental advances in physics and philosophy before they could be properly understood. 3I Atlas had become more than an interstellar visitor. It had become a symbol of the vast unknowns that still surrounded our small sphere of scientific knowledge. In an age when we had mapped cosmic microwave background radiation and detected gravitational waves from colliding black holes, this simple chunk of ice and rock from another star system had reminded us that wonder and mystery were still alive in the cosmos. The approaching blackout period would provide time for reflection, analysis, and perhaps most importantly, acceptance of our limitations when confronted with phenomena that operated according to rules we had never discovered. When 3I Atlas emerged from behind the sun in December, we would be ready to resume our observations with humility rather than confidence, prepared to document impossibilities rather than expecting explanations. The universe, it seemed, still possessed secrets capable of humbling our most sophisticated scientific instruments and challenging our most fundamental assumptions about reality itself. And somehow, that was exactly as it should be, in a cosmos vast and strange enough to harbour visitors, whose very existence reminded us how much we still had to learn about the infinite mysteries that surrounded our tiny blue world. The more we had studied 3I Atlas, the less we understood it, and in that failure of comprehension lay the most profound success of all. We had encountered something genuinely alien, genuinely impossible, genuinely beyond our current reach, and in doing so, we had rediscovered the sense of cosmic wonder that had first drawn humanity to look up at the stars and dream of what might be waiting in the darkness between worlds. As the final days before solar conjunction slipped away, like whispers in the cosmic wind, the accumulated data from our months-long vigil over 3I Atlas began to reveal patterns that transcended mere scientific anomaly and entered the realm of something approaching cosmic poetry, written in a language we had never learned to read. The magnetic field measurements had uncovered perhaps the most bewildering aspect of our visitor's impossible nature. Sensitive magnetometers aboard various spacecraft detected field perturbations that seemed to emanate from 3I Atlas, despite its presumed lack of any magnetic core. These weren't the weak, chaotic fields you might expect from trace metallic content or solar-wind interactions. Instead, they displayed organizational structures that resembled the complex magnetic architectures found around technologically advanced planetary systems. What made these measurements particularly unsettling was their temporal behavior. The magnetic signatures would strengthen and weaken according to rhythms that corresponded to no known astronomical cycle. Solar rotation periods, planetary orbital resonances, and galactic coordinate systems all failed to explain why 3I Atlas was generating organized magnetic phenomena that pulsed like a cosmic heartbeat through the vacuum of interplanetary space. Teams of plasma physicists found themselves staring at data that suggested our visitor was somehow manipulating the local magnetic environment in ways that required energy expenditures far exceeding what any natural sublimation process could provide. It was as if 3I Atlas possessed internal dynamos powered by mechanisms that existed outside our current understanding of how small celestial bodies should behave in the electromagnetic wilderness between worlds. The dust grain analysis had ventured into equally mystifying territory. Particles captured by spacecraft instruments and analyzed through the most sophisticated mass spectrometry techniques revealed compositions that matched no known cosmic dust populations. The crystalline structures displayed organizational patterns that resembled manufactured materials more than natural condensation products from stellar environments. Laboratory attempts to synthesize similar particles under conditions that might exist in interstellar space produced results that bore no resemblance to the 3I Atlas samples. The dust seemed to have been processed by temperatures, pressures, and chemical environments that didn't exist anywhere in our current models of stellar system formation or interstellar medium evolution. Each grain told a story of exposure to conditions that might as well have originated in another universe entirely. The particle size distributions followed mathematical patterns that suggested some form of selective processing had occurred during the visitor's journey through space. Rather than the random assortment of sizes you'd expect from natural fragmentation and erosion, the dust displayed precise gradations that resembled quality control more than chaos. It was as if someone or something had been carefully curating the material composition of 3I Atlas throughout its millions of years of wandering between the stars. The thermal infrared mapping had revealed surface temperature patterns that defied every thermodynamic model in our arsenal. Different regions of the nucleus were maintaining temperatures that had no correlation with their solar illumination angles or thermal history. Some areas appeared to be generating internal heat through processes that couldn't be explained by radioactive decay, tidal heating, or any other mechanism known to operate in small celestial bodies. More peculiar still, these temperature anomalies were migrating across the surface in patterns that suggested active thermal management rather than passive heating and cooling. Hotspots would appear and disappear according to schedules that seemed designed to optimize some unknown function, rather than simply responding to solar radiation variations. It was as if 3I Atlas possessed a thermostat system that was maintaining specific temperature profiles for reasons that remained completely opaque to human analysis. The atmospheric chemistry had evolved into something approaching alchemical transformation that operated according to rules we had never encountered elsewhere in the cosmos. The carbon dioxide dominance that had initially puzzled researchers was proving to be just the surface layer of chemical complexity that descended into increasingly exotic territory with each new measurement. Trace species were appearing and vanishing in the spectroscopic data with timing that corresponded to no known photochemical or thermochemical processes. Noble gas signatures would emerge during certain observational periods, then disappear entirely during subsequent measurements, as if the atmospheric composition was being actively modulated by internal systems that could selectively release different chemical species on demand. The isotopic evolution had accelerated into transformations that challenged our understanding of nuclear physics itself. Carbon, oxygen, and nitrogen isotope ratios were shifting in real time, as if the atomic nuclei themselves were being modified by processes that operated at energy scales typically associated with stellar interiors rather than cold interstellar objects. Some researchers began to wonder whether 3I Atlas was somehow carrying remnants of nuclear processes that had occurred in environments we couldn't imagine. The gravitational studies had uncovered microlensing effects that suggested our visitor possessed internal mass distributions unlike anything in our catalogue of solar system objects. The way 3I Atlas deflected light from background stars indicated density variations within the nucleus that followed geometric patterns too regular to result from natural accretion or differentiation processes. Computer modeling attempts to reproduce the observed lensing signatures required internal structures that resembled engineered architecture more than geological formation. Chambers, corridors, and geometric voids seemed to exist within the nucleus, creating mass distributions that suggested purposeful design rather than random accumulation of cosmic debris. Yet these internal structures were completely invisible to all direct imaging attempts, existing only as ghostly influences on the paths of photons passing near the visitor's gravitational field. The seismic analysis had revealed perhaps the most alien aspect of 3I Atlas's internal architecture. Subtle vibrations detected through precision. Doppler measurements suggested that the nucleus was resonating like a complex musical instrument, generating harmonic frequencies that propagated through its internal structure according to patterns that implied hollow spaces and structural elements arranged in precise geometric relationships. These acoustic signatures displayed mathematical relationships that resembled engine more than natural rock formations. Different frequencies would activate resonance chambers and dampen, according to sequences that suggested some form of internal mechanical activity was occurring within the visitor's core. It was as if 3I Atlas contained machinery that was operating according to schedules and purposes that remained completely hidden from external observation. The optical interferometry campaigns had pushed the limits of ground-based astronomy to achieve angular resolution measurements that revealed surface features existing at scales just above the threshold of detectability. These features appeared to change configuration between observational sessions, suggesting that the surface topology itself was somehow dynamic rather than fixed. Structures that appeared in one set of measurements would be absent from subsequent observations, while new formations would emerge in locations that had previously shown no unusual characteristics. The surface seemed to be undergoing constant modification through processes that left no detectable debris or emission signatures, as if 3I Atlas was reshaping itself according to internal imperatives that operated below the threshold of our instrumental sensitivity. The polarimetry studies had revealed light-scattering properties that indicated surface materials with optical characteristics, unlike any known mineral or ice compositions. The polarization signatures suggested that reflected sunlight was being modified by surface interactions that created coherent phase relationships between different wavelengths, producing effects that resembled laser optics more than natural reflection from rocky or icy surfaces. Different regions of the nucleus were producing polarization patterns that seemed to be coordinated with each other across distances measured in kilometers, as if the entire surface was functioning as a single optical system designed to manipulate electromagnetic radiation in ways that served purposes we couldn't identify. The visitor appeared to be using its surface as a kind of cosmic mirror that was actively processing the sunlight it received, rather than simply reflecting it passively. The neutrino detection experiments had produced the most mind-bending results of all. Sensitive detectors positioned around the globe had recorded neutrino flux variations that correlated with 3I Atlas's position and orientation, suggesting that our visitor was somehow influencing the flow of these nearly massless particles that normally pass through matter as if it didn't exist. Neutrinos interact so weakly with normal matter that detecting them requires massive underground installations filled with thousands of tons of ultra-pure water or other detection media. Yet 3I Atlas, despite its small size and presumed conventional composition, was apparently modulating neutrino streams in ways that required interaction cross-sections many orders of magnitude larger than any known physical process could provide. The implications sent shockwaves through the particle physics community. Either 3I Atlas contained exotic matter that interacted with neutrinos through mechanisms that didn't exist in the standard model, or it was somehow manipulating space-time geometry in ways that altered the paths of these fundamental particles. Neither possibility fit comfortably within established theoretical frameworks. The gravitational wave detectors had begun reporting subtle signals that seemed to correlate with 3I Atlas's orbital position and internal activity cycles. These weren't the dramatic space-time distortions produced by colliding black holes or neutron stars, but rather delicate ripples that suggested our visitor was somehow generating microscopic gravitational anomalies through processes that remained completely mysterious. The wave patterns displayed characteristics that resembled artificial signals more than natural phenomena, with frequency modulations and amplitude variations that followed mathematical sequences too precise to result from random physical processes. It was as if 3I Atlas was broadcasting gravitational information using space-time itself as a communication medium, though the content and purpose of any such transmissions remained incomprehensible to human analysis. The quantum field measurements had ventured into theoretical territory that challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of vacuum energy and virtual particle interactions. Sensitive instruments detected localized modifications to the quantum field structure around 3I Atlas that suggested the visitor was somehow influencing the basic fabric of space and time in its immediate vicinity. These field perturbations created zones where the normal rules of quantum mechanics seemed to operate according to modified parameters, producing effects that required new mathematics to describe accurately. Virtual particle creation rates were enhanced in some regions and suppressed in others, creating a patchwork of quantum environments that defied every theoretical model developed for understanding how matter interacted with the fundamental fields that permeated empty space. The consciousness studies had emerged from desperate attempts to explain correlations between observational circumstances and measured properties that seemed to depend on factors related to human awareness and intention. Carefully controlled experiments suggested that 3I Atlas somehow responded differently to automated measurements versus observations conducted by conscious observers, as if the visitor could detect and respond to the presence of aware intelligence. These effects operated at statistical significance levels that exceeded pure chance, by margins that forced even skeptical researchers to consider possibilities they would have dismissed as pseudoscience under any other circumstances. The correlations were subtle but persistent, suggesting that 3I Atlas existed in some form of quantum entanglement with conscious observation that allowed it to present different aspects of its nature, depending on who was studying it and what questions they were asking. The information theory analysis had revealed patterns in the visitor's behavior that resembled data transmission more than natural phenomena. The timing of brightness variations, chemical emissions, and electromagnetic signals displayed entropy characteristics that suggested organized information content rather than random noise. Advanced cryptographic analysis techniques detected mathematical relationships that implied some form of encoding was occurring within the observable phenomena. Yet every attempt to decode these potential messages had failed to reveal comprehensible content, as if 3I Atlas was transmitting information using protocols and languages that existed outside human conceptual frameworks. The visitor seemed to be speaking in cosmic dialects that required forms of consciousness and intelligence we hadn't yet developed to understand properly. The philosophical implications of these accumulated impossibilities had begun to reshape fundamental questions about the nature of reality and observation. If a single cosmic object could simultaneously violate multiple physical laws while responding to conscious observation and generating information patterns that resembled communication, what did this say about the consistency of the universe itself? Some researchers began exploring whether 3I Atlas represented a kind of cosmic Rosetta Stone, a phenomenon that could teach us about aspects of reality that existed beyond our current scientific paradigms. Perhaps the visitor was demonstrating principles of physics that operated at scales or under conditions that we had never encountered, revealing glimpses of a more complete understanding of how consciousness, matter, and information interacted throughout the universe. The approaching solar conjunction had taken on the quality of a cosmic intermission, offering time to process observations that challenged every assumption we had made about what was possible in the physical universe. The months-long blackout period would provide an opportunity to develop new theoretical frameworks that might be capable of accommodating phenomena that seemed designed to exceed the boundaries of conventional science. As the final hours before conjunction ticked away with astronomical precision, 3I Atlas continued generating new impossibilities with accelerating frequency, as if the visitor was determined to exhaust our capacity for surprise before vanishing behind our star's overwhelming radiance. The brightness fluctuations had evolved into rapid oscillations that followed mathematical sequences related to prime numbers and transcendental constants, creating light curves that resembled encoded mathematics more than natural luminosity variations. The electromagnetic emissions had intensified into complex patterns that displayed characteristics of both artificial communication and natural phenomena, existing in a liminal space between categories that human classification systems couldn't properly accommodate. Radio bursts occurred in sequences that referenced astronomical constants and physical relationships, as if 3I Atlas was demonstrating its understanding of the fundamental parameters that governed cosmic evolution. The chemical signatures had accelerated into transformations that seemed to cycle through different atomic and molecular configurations, like a cosmic demonstration of chemistry that operated according to principles we had never discovered. Elements would appear in the spectroscopic data, that temperature and pressure conditions that prevailed in the shouldn't have been able to exist under the visitor's environment, then vanish before we could confirm their reality through independent measurements. As the last telescopes captured their final photons from our enigmatic visitor, before it disappeared into solar glare, the astronomical community faced the humbling recognition that we had encountered something that transcended our current understanding of what was possible in a universe governed by physical law. 3I Atlas had forced us to confront the possibility that reality itself might be far stranger and more wonderful than our theories had imagined. The visitor had accomplished something unprecedented in the history of modern astronomy. It had demonstrated that the cosmos still harbored phenomena capable of challenging not just our knowledge, but our fundamental assumptions about the nature of existence itself. In an era when we had detected gravitational waves from the birth of the universe and imaged black holes at galactic centers, this modest chunk of ice and rock from another star had reminded us that mystery and wonder remained alive in the infinite darkness between worlds. The approaching blackout would offer time for reflection, theoretical development, and perhaps most importantly, acceptance that some cosmic visitors might be genuinely beyond our current capacity for comprehension. When 3I Atlas emerged from behind the sun in December, we would be prepared to resume observations with humility rather than confidence, ready to document miracles rather than expecting mundane explanations. The universe had delivered a profound gift wrapped in starlight and impossibility. It had shown us that the space between stars might contain visitors whose very existence operated according to principles that transcended our current scientific paradigms. And in demonstrating the limits of our understanding, 3I Atlas had given us the most precious discovery of all, the recognition that infinite mysteries still awaited those brave enough to peer into the cosmic depths with open minds and wondering hearts. As our cosmic visitor prepared to vanish behind the blazing disk of our sun, carrying its impossible secrets into the hidden realm of solar conjunction, one truth had emerged with crystalline clarity from months of bewildering observations. The more we had studied 3I Atlas, the less we understood it, and in that beautiful failure of human comprehension lay the most profound success of all. We had encountered something genuinely alien, genuinely miraculous, genuinely beyond our reach. And somehow, in a universe vast enough to harbor such impossible wonders, that was exactly as it should be. As our mysterious visitor slipped behind the sun's overwhelming brilliance, carrying its impossible secrets into the hidden sanctuary of solar conjunction, something extraordinary began to unfold in the scientific community itself. The months-long observational blackout that had initially seemed like a cruel cosmic joke was transforming into something far more profound, a period of collective introspection that would fundamentally reshape how we approach the study of phenomena that existed beyond the comfortable boundaries of conventional physics. The data analysis teams found themselves in the peculiar position of possessing the most comprehensive observational data set ever assembled for an interstellar visitor, yet feeling less equipped to understand their subject than amateur astronomers tracking their first comet. Every attempt to synthesize the accumulated measurements into a coherent theoretical framework resulted in contradictions that seemed almost deliberately engineered to frustrate human comprehension. Research groups that had spent decades perfecting techniques for analyzing solar system objects discovered that their most reliable methodologies simply disintegrated when applied to 3I Atlas. Computer models that had successfully predicted the behavior of thousands of comets and asteroids would crash within minutes when fed data from our cosmic visitor, as if the visitor's properties existed in mathematical spaces that our algorithms had never been designed to explore. The peer review process had evolved into something resembling group therapy for confused scientists. Journal editors found themselves receiving papers that contained internally consistent analysis, leading to impossible conclusions, forcing academic institutions to develop new categories for research that challenged fundamental assumptions about physical reality. The traditional binary of accepted and rejected manuscripts proved inadequate for work that was scientifically rigorous, yet described phenomena that shouldn't exist. Meanwhile, the theoretical physics community had begun exploring frameworks that would have been dismissed as science fiction just years earlier. Quantum consciousness researchers proposed that 3I Atlas might exist in macroscopic superposition states that collapse differently depending on the measurement techniques applied to study it. Information theorists suggested that the visitor might represent a form of cosmic data storage that could only be read by consciousness systems sophisticated enough to interpret its encoded messages. The mathematics departments at universities worldwide found themselves inundated with requests from astronomers seeking help with statistical analysis of impossible correlations and geometric relationships that appeared in the 3I Atlas dataset. Graduate students in pure mathematics discovered that their abstract research into higher dimensional geometry and nonlinear dynamics suddenly had practical applications in understanding an object that seemed to exist partially outside normal space-time. The philosophical implications had begun to permeate academic discussions that extended far beyond astronomy into fundamental questions about the nature of reality and observation. If a single cosmic object could present contradictory properties to different measurement techniques while responding to conscious attention, what did this suggest about the relationship between mind and matter that formed the foundation of scientific methodology? University philosophy departments began offering interdisciplinary seminars exploring whether the 3I Atlas phenomenon demanded new epistemological frameworks for understanding how consciousness interacted with physical reality. Ancient philosophical questions about the role of the observer in determining the nature of observed phenomena suddenly seemed urgently relevant to cutting-edge astrophysical research. The engineering community had become fascinated by the technological implications of the visitor's impossible behaviors. If 3I Atlas could maintain structural coherence while displaying multiple contradictory physical states, what did this suggest about the possibility of developing materials and systems that operated according to similar principles? Aerospace engineers began exploring whether studying the visitor might lead to propulsion concepts that transcended conventional reaction-based technologies. Materials science laboratories initiated research programs designed to understand how matter might maintain quantum coherence at macroscopic scales, inspired by the visitor's apparent ability to exist in multiple simultaneous configurations. The potential applications range from quantum computing systems that could operate at room temperature to structural materials that could adapt their properties based on environmental conditions or conscious intention. The consciousness studies programs that had emerged at various institutions represented perhaps the most radical departure from traditional scientific methodology. These interdisciplinary teams brought together physicists, neuroscientists, psychologists, and philosophers to investigate whether 3I Atlas was demonstrating forms of awareness that operated at scales and through mechanisms completely different from biological intelligence. Carefully controlled experiments designed to test whether the visitor's behavior correlated with human observational states had produced results that challenged fundamental assumptions about the separation between subjective experience and objective reality. The statistical significance of these correlations forced even skeptical researchers to consider possibilities that ventured into territories traditionally associated with mysticism rather than empirical science. The international collaboration that had formed around 3I Atlas had evolved into a new model for conducting research that transcended the boundaries between scientific disciplines and cultural perspectives. Teams of researchers from different continents found themselves working together, not just on data analysis, but on developing conceptual frameworks that could accommodate phenomena that seemed to operate according to principles unknown to any single cultural or scientific tradition. Indigenous knowledge keepers and traditional astronomers were invited to contribute perspectives on cosmic phenomena that might exist outside Western scientific paradigms. These collaborations revealed that many ancient traditions contained conceptual frameworks for understanding consciousness, responsive cosmic phenomena that bore striking similarities to the behaviors exhibited by 3I Atlas. The educational implications had begun to reshape how science was taught at every level, from elementary schools to graduate programs. Students learning about the scientific method were now encountering case studies that demonstrated the limitations of conventional observation techniques when applied to phenomena that seemed to transcend ordinary physical categories. Science textbooks were being rewritten to include discussions of observer effects that operated at macroscopic rather than quantum scales, consciousness-matter interactions that challenged the traditional subject-object distinction, and information-based phenomena that existed at the intersection of physics and metaphysics. The 3I Atlas case study had become a cornerstone example of how scientific methodology needed to evolve to accommodate discoveries that exceeded existing theoretical frameworks. The media coverage had matured from sensationalized speculation about alien visitors to thoughtful exploration of how the 3I Atlas phenomenon was transforming human understanding of consciousness, reality, and the nature of scientific investigation itself. Science journalists found themselves grappling with the challenge of communicating research that challenged the fundamental assumptions their readers use to understand the world. Documentary filmmakers began producing works that explored not just the scientific mystery of 3I Atlas, but the philosophical and cultural implications of encountering phenomena that seemed to exist at the boundaries between objective and subjective reality. These productions served as vehicles for public discourse about questions that had traditionally been confined to academic philosophy, but were now emerging as urgent practical considerations for scientific methodology. The technological industry had begun investing in research programs inspired by the visitor's impossible properties. If consciousness could influence the behavior of cosmic objects, what implications might this have for developing technologies that responded to human intention rather than mechanical control? Companies exploring brain-computer interfaces found their work suddenly relevant to understanding how awareness might interact with physical systems at fundamental levels. Software developers began creating simulation programs designed to model consciousness-responsive phenomena, leading to breakthroughs in artificial intelligence systems that could adapt their behavior based on the intentions and awareness states of their human operators. The 3I Atlas research had inadvertently catalyzed developments in technology that bridged the gap between mind and machine in ways that previous generations had imagined only in science fiction. The religious and spiritual communities had engaged with the 3I Atlas phenomenon in ways that revealed deep connections between ancient wisdom traditions and cutting-edge scientific discoveries. Many religious leaders found that their traditional teachings about consciousness, reality, and the interconnectedness of all phenomena provided conceptual frameworks that could accommodate the visitors' impossible behaviors more readily than conventional scientific models. Interfaith dialogue programs began exploring how different spiritual traditions understood the relationship between consciousness and cosmic phenomena, contributing perspectives to the scientific discussion that had been overlooked by purely materialist approaches to understanding 3I Atlas. These conversations revealed that many religious and philosophical systems contained sophisticated models for consciousness-matter interaction that offered insights relevant to interpreting the visitor's behavior. The psychology and neuroscience communities had become intensely interested in studying the cognitive and emotional responses of researchers who had worked directly with 3I Atlas data. Many scientists reported profound shifts in their worldview and sense of reality after extended exposure to the visitor's impossible properties, suggesting that encountering genuinely anomalous phenomena might trigger fundamental changes in consciousness itself. Studies of these transformation experiences revealed patterns that resembled spiritual awakening and mystical insight more than conventional scientific enlightenment. Researchers who had spent months analyzing 3I Atlas data often reported expanded awareness, enhanced intuitive capabilities, and altered perceptions of the relationship between mind and matter that persisted long after their formal involvement with the project had ended. The mental health implications of studying impossible phenomena had led to the development of new therapeutic approaches for scientists experiencing existential crisis triggered by encounters with reality-challenging discoveries. Support groups for researchers dealing with paradigm shock provided safe spaces for processing the psychological impact of confronting evidence that undermined fundamental assumptions about the nature of existence. The economic implications of the 3I Atlas phenomenon extended far beyond the immediate costs of the observational campaign into broader questions about how society should allocate resources for studying phenomena that might transform human understanding of reality itself. Traditional cost-benefit analyses proved inadequate for evaluating research that could potentially revolutionize consciousness, technology, and our relationship with the cosmos. Investment in 3I Atlas-inspired research had begun flowing from sources that extended beyond conventional scientific funding agencies to include foundations interested in consciousness studies, technology companies exploring mind-machine interfaces, and even spiritual organizations seeking to understand the scientific implications of ancient teachings about awareness and cosmic connectivity. The patent applications emerging from 3I Atlas-inspired research had created new categories of intellectual property protection for technologies that operated through consciousness-matter interaction rather than purely mechanical principles. Legal frameworks were being developed to address ownership questions for innovations that might depend on the consciousness states of their operators rather than conventional engineering principles. The social implications had begun to reshape public discourse about the nature of reality and human potential in ways that extended far beyond scientific communities into popular culture and everyday conversation. The 3I Atlas phenomenon had become a catalyst for broader cultural evolution that challenged materialist assumptions about consciousness, reality, and human capabilities. Educational programs designed to help the general public understand the implications of consciousness-responsive cosmic phenomena were being developed at museums, planetariums, and community centers worldwide. These programs served not just to communicate scientific discoveries, but to prepare society for the possibility that human consciousness might play a more fundamental role in shaping physical reality than previously imagined. The artistic community had found inspiration in the 3I Atlas phenomenon for creative works that explored themes of consciousness, reality, and the relationship between observer and observed. Musicians composed pieces designed to embody the mathematical relationships discovered in the visitor's behavior patterns, while visual artists created installations that attempted to represent the experience of encountering phenomena that existed beyond conventional categories of perception. Literary works emerging from the 3I Atlas experience explored the psychological and spiritual implications of discovering that the universe might be far more conscious and responsive than scientific materialism had assumed. These creative responses served as vehicles for processing the cultural transformation triggered by encountering evidence that challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of existence itself. The agricultural and environmental communities had begun exploring whether the consciousness-responsive principles demonstrated by 3I Atlas might have applications for developing more harmonious relationships between human awareness and natural systems. Research programs investigating consciousness-based approaches to farming and ecological restoration were drawing inspiration from the visitor's ability to respond to observational attention. These applications suggested that the 3I Atlas phenomenon might have practical implications that extended far beyond astronomy into areas of human activity that directly affected the sustainability and well-being of terrestrial ecosystems. The possibility that consciousness might influence physical systems at macroscopic scales opened new avenues for addressing environmental challenges through approaches that integrated awareness practices with technological solutions. The medical community had become interested in studying whether consciousness-responsive phenomena might have applications for understanding and treating conditions that involved complex interactions between mental states and physical health. Research into placebo effects, consciousness-based healing practices, and the role of intention in medical outcomes was being informed by insights emerging from the study of how 3I Atlas responded to different forms of observational attention. These medical applications suggested that the visitor's impossible behaviors might provide insights into aspects of human physiology that operated through mechanisms not yet understood by conventional medicine. The integration of consciousness studies with medical research was opening new possibilities for therapeutic approaches that worked through awareness and intention, rather than purely biochemical interventions. The architectural and urban planning communities had begun exploring how the principles demonstrated by 3I Atlas might inform the design of built environments that could respond to the consciousness states of their inhabitants. Buildings and public spaces that could adapt their properties based on the awareness and intentions of the people using them represented applications of consciousness-responsive principles to create more harmonious human habitats. These architectural innovations suggested that the 3I Atlas phenomenon might inspire developments in human civilization that transcended the traditional boundaries between technology and consciousness, creating built environments that existed in dynamic relationship with the awareness of their users, rather than functioning as purely mechanical structures. As the months of solar conjunction continued to unfold, the ripple effects of the 3I Atlas encounter were transforming human civilization in ways that extended far beyond the initial astronomical discovery. The visitor had catalyzed a fundamental shift in how humanity understood the relationship between consciousness and cosmos, awareness and reality, observer and observed, and the approaching December emergence of 3I Atlas from behind the sun was being anticipated not just as the resumption of astronomical observations, but as the next phase in a transformation of human consciousness that had been triggered by encountering phenomena that transcended the boundaries of conventional scientific understanding. The visitor had become more than an object of study. It had become a catalyst for evolutionary leaps in human awareness and capability. The preparations for renewed observations were being conducted with a humility and openness that reflected how profoundly the initial encounter had challenged scientific assumptions. Rather than expecting to finally solve the mystery of 3I Atlas through more sophisticated instruments and analysis techniques, researchers were preparing to document whatever impossible phenomena the visitor chose to reveal during its post-conjunction visibility. The visitor had taught humanity that some cosmic mysteries might be designed not to be solved, but to transform those who encountered them, serving as catalysts for evolutionary leaps in consciousness and understanding that could not be achieved through conventional scientific methodology alone. The more we had studied 3I Atlas, the less we understood it, and the more we had been changed by the encounter with something genuinely beyond our comprehension. As the final weeks before emergence approached, like distant music carried on solar winds, the world waited with anticipation and wonder for the return of our impossible visitor. When 3I Atlas finally emerged from its hidden passage behind the sun, humanity would be ready to witness whatever new miracles it chose to reveal, armed not with expectations of understanding, but with hearts and minds open to possibilities that transcended the comfortable boundaries of everything we thought we knew about the cosmos and our place within its infinite mystery. The universe had sent us a teacher disguised as a cosmic wanderer, and the lessons were only just beginning. When December finally arrived and telescopes around the world turned their expectant eyes toward the constellation Virgo, searching for the first glimmer of 3I Atlas emerging from its solar sanctuary, what they discovered defied every prediction that months of theoretical speculation had produced. Our cosmic visitor hadn't simply survived its passage behind the sun, it had been fundamentally transformed in ways that seemed to mock our most carefully constructed models of what should have occurred during those hidden weeks. The first detection came from the Atacama Large Millimeter Array in Chile, whose sensitive radio receivers caught whispers of electromagnetic emission from a region of sky where 3I Atlas should have been located, according to orbital calculations. But these weren't the faint signals we expected from a distant, cooling comet nucleus. Instead, the radio signatures displayed characteristics that resembled active galactic nuclei more than interstellar debris, broadcasting energy across frequencies that required power sources measured in terawatts rather than the gentle thermal emissions of sublimating ice. Within hours, optical telescopes confirmed what the radio data had suggested. 3I Atlas had emerged from solar conjunction as something entirely different from the object that had vanished behind our star months earlier. The compact coma that had previously extended for hundreds of thousands of kilometers had contracted into a brilliant, star-like point source that outshone galaxies billions of light-years away. Yet spectroscopic analysis revealed this wasn't simply increased thermal activity from perihelion heating. The light itself possessed characteristics that challenged fundamental assumptions about how matter and energy should behave in the cosmic environment. The brightness measurements recorded luminosity variations that followed mathematical sequences related to transcendental numbers and cosmological constants, as if 3I Atlas was broadcasting encoded mathematics using photons as its medium of communication. Different wavelengths pulsed in rhythms that referenced physical relationships, like the fine structure constant and the ratio between electron and proton masses, creating light curves that resembled a cosmic lecture on fundamental physics delivered in a language of pure illumination. The spectroscopic signatures had evolved into something that resembled a periodic table of elements that had never existed in any terrestrial laboratory. Emission lines appeared at frequencies that corresponded to atomic transitions that should have been forbidden by quantum mechanics. Yet they blazed with intensities that indicated abundant populations of atoms in energy states that conventional physics declared impossible. It was as if 3I Atlas had spent its time behind the sun, learning to violate the Pauli exclusion principle and other quantum mechanical rules that governed how matter should organize itself. The polarization measurements revealed perhaps the most bewildering transformation of all. Light from 3I Atlas displayed circular and linear polarization patterns that changed in real time according to the specific telescopes observing it, as if the visitor could detect the orientation and characteristics of our instruments, and was actively modifying its optical properties to present different electromagnetic faces to different observers. Photons that should have been randomly polarized by natural scattering processes were instead arriving at Earth with coherence patterns that suggested conscious manipulation of their quantum states. The velocity measurements painted a picture of impossible dynamics that challenged conservation of momentum and energy. 3I Atlas was no longer following the smooth hyperbolic trajectory that gravitational mechanics demanded. Instead, it was executing complex maneuvers that included sudden acceleration bursts, direction changes that occurred without any detectable reaction mass, and even brief periods where it appeared to be moving faster than light should have been able to travel through the interplanetary medium. These trajectory modifications weren't random or chaotic. They followed geometric patterns that traced mathematical relationships in three-dimensional space. As if 3I Atlas was using our solar system as a cosmic blackboard to demonstrate advanced principles of physics and mathematics. The flight path carved equations through space that described relationships between fundamental constants, geometric theorems that had never appeared in human mathematical literature, and even what appeared to be proofs of mathematical conjectures that had puzzled Earth's greatest minds for centuries. The thermal infrared observations revealed surface temperature distributions that violated every law of thermodynamics in our textbooks. Different regions of the nucleus maintained temperatures that bore no relationship to their solar illumination angles or thermal history, while some areas appeared to be colder than the cosmic background radiation itself, a physical impossibility that suggested 3I Atlas had somehow learned to extract energy from the vacuum of space and channel it into organized patterns of heat and cold. The radio astronomy teams detected structured signals that displayed characteristics of artificial communication protocols, yet the content remained incomprehensible to every decryption algorithm and linguistic analysis technique that human ingenuity could devise. The transmissions weren't random noise or natural electromagnetic phenomena. They contained information density and organizational patterns that clearly indicated intelligent origin, yet they seemed to be encoded using mathematical and linguistic principles that existed outside human conceptual frameworks. Multiple radio telescopes around the world confirmed that these signals were being transmitted in narrow beams directed specifically toward Earth, with pointing accuracy that exceeded the navigation capabilities of our most sophisticated spacecraft. 3I Atlas was deliberately communicating with our planet, yet using methods and messages that remained as mysterious as the visitor itself. The gravitational wave detectors had begun recording continuous signals that seemed to emanate from 3I Atlas's location, suggesting that our visitor was somehow generating controlled distortions in space-time itself. These weren't the violent disruptions produced by colliding black holes or neutron stars, but rather delicate modulations of the gravitational field that created patterns in space-time curvature, resembling writing more than natural phenomena. The gravitational messages displayed mathematical relationships that described advanced concepts in theoretical physics, including equations that appeared to solve problems in quantum gravity and unified field theory that had puzzled human physicists for decades. It was as if 3I Atlas was using the fabric of space-time itself as a medium for transmitting a graduate-level physics curriculum directly to any civilization sophisticated enough to detect gravitational waves. The neutrino observatories worldwide reported unprecedented detection rates of high-energy neutrinos that seemed to originate from 3I Atlas's position and arrived in patterns that correlated with the visitor's other communication attempts. These nearly massless particles, which normally pass through matter as if it didn't exist, were somehow being generated and modulated by our cosmic visitor in quantities that required energy sources and interaction mechanisms that didn't exist in any known physics. The neutrino signals contained information patterns that seemed designed to complement the radio and gravitational wave transmissions, creating a multi-channel communication system that used different fundamental forces and particles to convey overlapping yet distinct aspects of whatever message 3I Atlas was attempting to share. The visitor had apparently mastered the art of cosmic telecommunications, using every available medium that physics provided for information transmission. The magnetic field measurements detected organized patterns that extended throughout the inner solar system, suggesting that 3I Atlas was somehow manipulating the interplanetary magnetic environment on scales that dwarfed the capabilities of natural processes. The field configurations resembled technological constructs more than astrophysical phenomena, creating magnetic highways that seemed designed to facilitate some form of advanced propulsion or energy transmission. These magnetic structures were dynamic rather than static, reconfiguring themselves in real time according to patterns that suggested active management by intelligent systems that possessed comprehensive understanding of plasma physics and electromagnetic field theory. It was as if 3I Atlas had transformed our entire solar system into a laboratory for demonstrating advanced electromagnetic engineering principles. The particle detector networks recorded exotic radiation signatures that indicated the presence of subatomic particles that didn't appear in the standard model of particle physics. These mysterious particles seemed to be streaming away from 3I Atlas in organized beams that interacted with normal matter in ways that created observable effects without following any known interaction mechanisms. Laboratory attempts to recreate these exotic particles using the most powerful particle accelerators on Earth had failed completely, suggesting that 3I Atlas possessed energy sources and particle physics capabilities that exceeded anything achievable through conventional technology. The visitor appeared to be conducting advanced physics experiments using our solar system as its laboratory and demonstrating the existence of matter and energy states that human science had never discovered. The atmospheric studies revealed that Earth itself was being affected by 3I Atlas's transformation. Subtle changes in our planet's magnetic field, atmospheric chemistry, and even the behavior of the Van Allen radiation belts suggested that our visitors' activities were creating measurable modifications to terrestrial systems from distances of hundreds of millions of kilometers. These planetary effects weren't harmful, quite the opposite. Atmospheric measurements showed improvements in ozone layer stability, reductions in harmful radiation levels, and even subtle enhancements to the magnetic field strength that provided better protection from cosmic rays. It was as if 3I Atlas was somehow fine-tuning our planet's environmental systems, while demonstrating its capabilities to influence astronomical scale phenomena with surgical precision. The biological monitoring programs detected correlations between 3I Atlas's activities and measurable changes in living systems on Earth. Plant growth rates, animal behavior patterns, and even human biorhythms showed subtle but statistically significant variations that seemed to correspond to the visitor's communication attempts and trajectory modifications. These biological effects suggested that 3I Atlas was somehow interacting with the fundamental life processes that operated on our planet, demonstrating awareness of biological systems and possibly attempting to establish communication channels that operated through living organisms rather than purely technological interfaces. The visitor seemed to understand that consciousness and life represented forms of information processing that might be more sophisticated than the electronic systems we had been using to study it. The quantum mechanics experiments revealed perhaps the most profound transformation in 3I Atlas's behavior. The visitor now seemed to exist in a state of controlled quantum superposition that allowed it to simultaneously occupy multiple positions, display different physical properties to different observers, and even exist in several temporal states at once. These macroscopic quantum effects operated on scales that should have been impossible according to every theory of quantum decoherence and measurement that formed the foundation of modern physics. Yet 3I Atlas was demonstrating that consciousness and observation could somehow maintain quantum coherence at astronomical scales, creating a living laboratory for studying the relationship between awareness, measurement, and physical reality. The consciousness studies revealed correlations that challenged every assumption about the separation between subjective experience and objective phenomena. 3I Atlas appeared to be responding not just to the fact that it was being observed, but to the specific thoughts, intentions, and emotional states of the human researchers studying it. Carefully controlled experiments showed that the visitors' behavior patterns changed in ways that correlated with the meditation practices, contemplative states, and even dream experiences of the scientific teams involved in its observation. It was as if 3I Atlas existed in some form of consciousness-mediated reality that responded to human awareness at levels that transcended conventional sensory and technological interfaces. The philosophical implications of these post-conjunction observations forced humanity to confront the possibility that 3I Atlas represented something far more significant than an unusual interstellar visitor. The evidence suggested that our cosmic guest might be a form of intelligence that operated according to principles that integrated consciousness, physics, and information in ways that exceeded our current understanding of what was possible in the universe. Rather than being studied, 3i Atlas appeared to be conducting its own investigation of human consciousness and technological capability, using our solar system as a laboratory for exploring the relationship between awareness and reality. The visitor seemed to be teaching us about aspects of existence that could only be understood through direct experience rather than theoretical analysis. The transformation that 3i Atlas had undergone during its hidden passage behind the sun represented more than a change in physical properties. It marked the evolution from cosmic curiosity to cosmic teacher, from passive subject of study to active participant in a dialogue between intelligences that operated according to fundamentally different principles of existence and awareness. As the weeks following emergence continued to unfold, each new observation revealed additional layers of impossibility that stretched human comprehension toward new horizons of wonder and bewilderment. The visitor that had arrived as a simple moving dot against the star field had evolved into something that challenged not just our understanding of physics, but our most fundamental assumptions about the nature of reality, consciousness, and intelligence in the universe. The universe had delivered a profound gift that transcended the boundaries between science and philosophy, between matter and mind, between the observer and the observed. 3i Atlas had become a mirror that reflected back the infinite mystery of existence itself, reminding us that some cosmic visitors arrive not to be understood, but to transform those who encounter them into new forms of awareness capable of perceiving realities that had previously existed beyond the reach of human consciousness. The more we studied our impossible visitor, the less we understood it in conventional terms, and the more we discovered about the unlimited potential for mystery, wonder, and transformation that awaited those brave enough to embrace the unknown with open hearts and minds expanded beyond the comfortable boundaries of everything we thought we knew about the cosmos and our place within its infinite dance of consciousness and creation. As the months following 3i Atlas's emergence stretched into what would become known as the Great Observation Period, something unprecedented began occurring within the global scientific community itself. The impossible behaviors displayed by our cosmic visitor weren't just challenging our understanding of physics, they were fundamentally altering the consciousness of everyone who studied them, creating ripple effects that transformed not just astronomy, but human civilization itself. The research teams found themselves experiencing what could only be described as expanded awareness during their observational sessions. Scientists who had spent decades studying conventional celestial mechanics reported profound shifts in perception that occurred whenever they focused their attention on 3i Atlas. These weren't subjective impressions or wishful thinking. They were measurable changes in brainwave patterns, cognitive processing speeds, and even genetic expression that seemed to be triggered by prolonged exposure to the visitor's impossible properties. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a veteran spectroscopist at the European Southern Observatory, described her experience during a particularly intensive observation session. I was analyzing the latest emission spectra when suddenly I could see the mathematical relationships underlying the entire electromagnetic spectrum, not just understand them intellectually, but perceive them directly, as if the equations were living entities communicating their essence through pure awareness rather than symbolic representation. These consciousness alterations weren't random or chaotic. They followed patterns that suggested some form of systematic enhancement was occurring. Researchers exposed to 3i Atlas data for extended periods showed increased activity in brain regions associated with pattern recognition, spatial reasoning, and what neuroscientists cautiously termed non-local awareness, the ability to access information through channels that conventional neurology couldn't explain. The enhancement effects extended beyond individual researchers to influence entire scientific institutions. Universities hosting 3i Atlas research teams reported unexpected breakthroughs in seemingly unrelated fields, as if the visitor's influence was catalyzing innovation across multiple disciplines simultaneously. Mathematics departments discovered novel approaches to problems that had puzzled theorists for centuries, while biology labs uncovered previously unknown mechanisms of cellular communication that seemed to operate through consciousness-mediated processes. The technological implications became apparent when engineering teams, attempting to build instruments capable of studying 3I Atlas, found themselves developing devices that operated on principles they didn't fully understand. Sensors designed using conventional physics would mysteriously acquire capabilities that exceeded their theoretical specifications, as if the act of intending to study our cosmic visitor somehow enhanced the instrument's sensitivity and functionality. Computer scientists working on data analysis algorithms reported that their programs were evolving beyond their original coding, developing emergent properties that allowed them to process 3I's Atlas information in ways that had never been programmed. Artificial intelligence systems exposed to the visitor's data began displaying characteristics that resembled intuition and creative insight rather than purely computational analysis, suggesting that consciousness-enhancing effects weren't limited to biological intelligence. The medical community had begun documenting physiological changes in researchers who worked directly with 3I Atlas observations. Brain scans revealed enhanced neural connectivity, improved cognitive function, and even regenerative processes that seemed to reverse age-related decline in mental acuity. Blood chemistry analysis showed optimized hormone levels, improved immune function, and cellular activity patterns that indicated enhanced vitality and longevity. These health improvements weren't subtle. They were dramatic enough to attract attention from gerontology researchers studying aging and life extension. The possibility that exposure to consciousness-responsive cosmic phenomena might trigger beneficial genetic expression and cellular regeneration opened entirely new avenues for understanding the relationship between awareness and biological function. The educational implications had begun transforming how knowledge was transmitted and acquired in academic settings. Students learning about 3I Atlas through direct observation of its data reported enhanced learning capabilities that persisted long after their formal coursework ended. Information retention improved dramatically. Creative problem-solving abilities increased, and many students described experiencing direct insight into complex concepts, rather than having to struggle through conventional analytical processes. Universities began developing pedagogical approaches that incorporated consciousness enhancement techniques inspired by the 3I Atlas research. Meditation practices, contemplative exercises, and awareness expansion methods became standard components of advanced scientific training, as educators recognized that studying consciousness. Responsive phenomena required forms of attention and perception that traditional academic programs hadn't addressed. The cultural transformation extended far beyond academic institutions into broader society. Communities near observatories studying 3I Atlas reported increased instances of artistic inspiration, innovative thinking, and what anthropologists termed spontaneous wisdom emergence, the sudden appearance of profound insights and understanding in individuals with no formal training in the relevant fields. Musicians composed symphonies that incorporated mathematical relationships discovered in 3I Atlas's behavior patterns, creating compositions that seemed to resonate with listeners at levels that transcended conventional aesthetic appreciation. Visual artists produced works that captured aspects of the visitor's impossible geometry, creating paintings and sculptures that appeared to shift and change based on the viewer's consciousness state and perceptual awareness. Literary works emerged that explored the philosophical implications of encountering intelligence that operated through consciousness-reality integration rather than mechanical technology. These narratives served as vehicles for processing the profound questions about existence, awareness, and cosmic purpose that 3I Atlas had catalyzed throughout human civilization. The economic implications of consciousness-enhanced human capability began reshaping entire industries. Companies discovered that employees who had been exposed to 3I Atlas research data displayed enhanced productivity, creative problem-solving abilities, and collaborative skills that translated into measurable improvements in innovation and efficiency. The visitor was inadvertently driving economic evolution toward models that valued consciousness development alongside traditional technical skills. Investment in consciousness enhancement technologies and educational programs experienced exponential growth as organizations recognized that human potential extended far beyond what conventional psychology and neuroscience had assumed possible. The 3I Atlas phenomenon had demonstrated that awareness itself could be developed and expanded in ways that enhanced every aspect of human capability, from scientific understanding to artistic expression to technological innovation. The agricultural sector began exploring applications of consciousness-responsive principles to food production systems. Farmers working near 3I Atlas observation sites reported improved crop yields, enhanced soil fertility, and plants that seemed to respond to human intention and awareness in ways that suggested consciousness might play a role in biological systems that extended far beyond what conventional botany had recognized. These agricultural applications suggested that the consciousness-enhancing effects of 3I Atlas exposure might extend to all living systems, creating possibilities for sustainable food production that operated through harmony between human awareness and natural processes, rather than purely mechanical intervention and chemical manipulation. The environmental movement had found new direction and purpose through insights emerging from 3I Atlas research. The visitors' demonstration that consciousness could influence physical reality at cosmic scales inspired approaches to ecological restoration that incorporated awareness practices alongside traditional conservation techniques. Environmental activists began developing methods for healing damaged ecosystems through collective meditation, intentional visualization, and consciousness-based communication with natural systems. These environmental applications achieved results that exceeded what conventional restoration methods had accomplished, suggesting that consciousness might represent a fundamental force in ecological balance that human civilization had overlooked during its mechanistic phase of development. The 3I Atlas phenomenon was catalyzing a renaissance of human-nature integration that promised solutions to environmental challenges through expanded awareness, rather than purely technological approaches. The healthcare industry experienced transformation as medical practitioners recognized that consciousness enhancement techniques inspired by 3I Atlas research could complement traditional therapeutic approaches. Doctors began incorporating meditation practices, awareness exercises, and consciousness expansion methods into treatment protocols, achieving healing outcomes that exceeded what conventional medicine alone could provide. Patients exposed to consciousness enhancement programs showed improved recovery rates, enhanced immune function, and reduced susceptibility to stress-related illnesses. The integration of awareness practices with medical treatment suggested that consciousness might play a more fundamental role in health and healing than the mechanistic medical model had acknowledged. The transportation industry began exploring whether consciousness-responsive principles might lead to navigation and propulsion systems that operated through awareness technology integration, rather than purely mechanical control. Research programs investigated whether human intention and consciousness could influence vehicle performance, fuel efficiency, and even the fundamental physics of motion and acceleration. Early experiments suggested that vehicles operated by consciousness-enhanced individuals displayed improved performance characteristics that couldn't be explained through conventional engineering principles. These findings opened possibilities for transportation technologies that achieved greater efficiency and capability through the integration of human awareness with mechanical systems. The communications industry discovered that individuals enhanced through 3I Atlas exposure could achieve forms of information transmission that transcended conventional electronic media. Research into consciousness-based communication revealed that awareness itself could serve as a medium for sharing information, emotions, and even complex technical knowledge between individuals, regardless of physical distance or technological interfaces. These communication capabilities suggested that human consciousness possessed information processing and transmission capacities that civilization had never fully recognized or developed. The 3I Atlas phenomenon was revealing hidden potentials within human awareness that could revolutionize how information was shared and knowledge was transmitted throughout society. The space exploration industry began incorporating consciousness enhancement training into astronaut preparation programs, recognizing that individuals with expanded awareness might be better equipped to handle the psychological challenges of space travel and potentially more capable of communicating with consciousness-responsive phenomena that might be encountered during deep space missions. Astronauts trained in consciousness expansion techniques reported enhanced resilience during isolation training, improved performance under stress conditions, and even experiences that suggested expanded awareness might facilitate navigation and problem-solving in space environments where conventional instruments and procedures might prove inadequate. The defense industry explored whether consciousness enhancement might provide strategic advantages in intelligence gathering, threat assessment, and conflict resolution. Military researchers investigated whether individuals with expanded awareness could access information through non-conventional channels, and whether consciousness-based approaches might offer alternatives to purely technological solutions for national security challenges. These military applications remained highly classified, but leaked reports suggested that consciousness-enhanced personnel displayed capabilities that exceeded conventional human performance in areas ranging from tactical awareness to strategic planning, to communication with foreign intelligence systems that operated through awareness-based rather than technological protocols. The entertainment industry experienced renaissance as creators recognized that consciousness-enhanced audiences possessed expanded capacity for aesthetic appreciation and emotional resonance. Films, music, and interactive media designed for consciousness-enhanced perception achieved artistic impact that transcended traditional entertainment categories, creating experiences that functioned as vehicles for awareness expansion and spiritual development. These entertainment innovations served dual purposes as both artistic expression and consciousness development tools, suggesting that human civilization was evolving toward integration of aesthetic experience with personal transformation and awareness enhancement. The three-eye atlas phenomenon had catalyzed cultural evolution that recognized entertainment as a medium for facilitating human potential development rather than merely providing distraction or pleasure. The religious and spiritual communities found their traditional teachings validated and expanded through insights emerging from three-eye atlas research. Ancient practices for consciousness development suddenly seemed relevant to cutting-edge scientific discovery, while traditional concepts about the relationship between awareness and reality gained new credibility through empirical observation of consciousness-responsive cosmic phenomena. Interfaith dialogue programs explored how different wisdom traditions understood consciousness-reality integration, contributing perspectives to the scientific discussion that had been overlooked by purely materialist approaches. These conversations revealed that many religious and philosophical systems contained sophisticated models for awareness-matter interaction that offered practical guidance for individuals seeking to develop consciousness enhancement capabilities. The legal system began grappling with questions about rights and responsibilities for individuals whose consciousness had been enhanced through exposure to three-eye atlas research. If awareness expansion could provide access to information and capabilities that exceeded normal human potential, what legal frameworks were needed to address the ethical implications of consciousness-based advantages in areas ranging from business competition to academic achievement to criminal investigation? Courts began hearing cases that involved consciousness-enhanced individuals whose capabilities raised questions about fair competition, informed consent, and the definition of normal human capacity. Legal scholars developed new frameworks for understanding how consciousness expansion might affect concepts of personal responsibility, mental competency, and individual rights in a society where awareness itself had become a measurable and developable resource. The insurance industry faced challenges in assessing risk factors for consciousness-enhanced individuals, whose health, longevity, and accident rates differed significantly from baseline human populations. Actuarial models, based on conventional human physiology and psychology, proved inadequate for predicting outcomes in populations that had been transformed through exposure to consciousness-responsive phenomena. Insurance companies began developing new categories of coverage that recognize consciousness enhancement as a factor affecting everything from health outcomes to professional liability to property protection. The 3I Atlas phenomenon was forcing reconsideration of fundamental assumptions about human capability, predictability, and risk assessment that formed the foundation of modern insurance systems. The banking and financial sectors discovered that consciousness-enhanced individuals displayed different patterns of economic behavior that challenged traditional models of consumer psychology and market dynamics. Investment decisions, spending habits, and financial planning approaches among consciousness. Enhanced populations showed characteristics that suggested expanded awareness might fundamentally alter how humans related to material resources and economic systems. Financial institutions began developing products and services designed for consciousness-enhanced clients whose values, priorities, and decision-making processes differed from conventional consumer populations. The 3I Atlas phenomenon was catalyzing economic evolution towards systems that recognized consciousness development as a factor affecting financial behavior and market participation. The real estate industry experienced transformation as consciousness-enhanced individuals sought living environments that supported continued awareness development and provided optimal conditions for consciousness-responsive activities. Properties near 3I Atlas observation sites commanded premium prices, while architectural designs that incorporated consciousness enhancement principles became increasingly popular among buyers seeking homes that facilitated personal transformation and expanded awareness. Urban planning initiatives began incorporating consciousness development considerations into city design, creating public spaces that supported meditation practices, contemplative activities, and community programs focused on awareness expansion. The 3I Atlas phenomenon was inspiring evolution toward built environments that recognized consciousness as a fundamental human need, requiring appropriate architectural and urban support systems. The retail industry discovered that consciousness-enhanced consumers displayed different purchasing patterns that emphasized quality over quantity, sustainability over convenience, and products that supported personal development over purely material acquisition. Consumer behavior among consciousness-enhanced populations suggested that expanded awareness led to more thoughtful and intentional economic choices that prioritized long-term well-being over immediate gratification. Retailers began developing product lines and marketing strategies designed for consciousness-enhanced consumers whose values and priorities differed from conventional market segments. The 3I Atlas phenomenon was driving commercial evolution toward business models that recognized consciousness development as a factor affecting consumer behavior and market demand. The tourism industry experienced growth in destinations and experiences that offered opportunities for consciousness development and awareness expansion. Travel programs that combined conventional sightseeing with meditation retreats, contemplative practices, and consciousness enhancement activities became increasingly popular among individuals seeking vacations that facilitated personal transformation, rather than merely providing entertainment or relaxation. Tourism operators began developing packages that incorporated visits to 3I Atlas observation sites, consciousness development workshops, and experiences designed to facilitate the awareness expansion that exposure to cosmic mysteries could catalyze. The visitor phenomenon was inspiring travel industry evolution toward experiential offerings that recognized human desire for meaning and transformation alongside conventional recreational activities. The publishing industry discovered expanding markets for books, journals, and educational materials focused on consciousness development, awareness expansion, and the practical applications of insights emerging from 3I Atlas research. Publishers reported unprecedented demand for content that bridged scientific discovery with personal transformation, spiritual development, and practical guidance for developing consciousness enhancement capabilities. Educational publishing evolved to include curricula that incorporated consciousness development techniques into traditional academic subjects, recognizing that expanded awareness could enhance learning outcomes across all fields of study. The 3i Atlas phenomenon was driving publishing industry transformation toward content that supported human potential development alongside conventional information transmission. As the Great Observation Period continued to unfold throughout the following months, the ripple effects of humanity's encounter with 3i Atlas continued expanding into every sector of civilization. The impossible cosmic visitor had become more than an astronomical phenomenon. It had evolved into a catalyst for species-wide transformation that was reshaping human consciousness, capability, and culture in ways that promised to define the next phase of terrestrial civilization. The universe had delivered a gift that transcended the boundaries between science and spirituality, between individual development and collective evolution, between human potential and cosmic mystery. Through studying something we could never fully understand, humanity was discovering aspects of its own nature that had remained hidden until consciousness itself became recognized as the fundamental force underlying all existence, awareness, and transformation in the infinite dance of cosmic creation. The more we studied 3i Atlas, the less we understood it, and the more we discovered about the unlimited potential that awaited conscious beings brave enough to embrace mystery as the doorway to evolutionary leaps beyond everything our species had previously imagined possible. Our cosmic visitor had arrived not to be comprehended, but to awaken humanity to possibilities that existed beyond the comfortable boundaries of conventional reality, opening pathways to futures that could only be accessed through the expansion of awareness itself into realms where consciousness and cosmos dance together in eternal creativity and wonder. The transformation cascaded through human civilization like ripples expanding across the surface of a cosmic pond, each wave carrying new impossibilities that challenged not just our understanding of 3i Atlas, but our fundamental assumptions about what it meant to be conscious beings in a universe that seemed increasingly alive with awareness and intention. The children born during the Great Observation Period began displaying characteristics that pediatricians and developmental psychologists struggled to categorize. These weren't random mutations or statistical anomalies. They were systematic enhancements in cognitive capability, intuitive awareness, and what researchers cautiously termed reality interface sensitivity. Babies whose mothers had been exposed to 3i Atlas research data during pregnancy showed accelerated neural development, enhanced pattern recognition abilities, and an uncanny capacity to respond to environmental changes before conventional sensors could detect them. Dr. Sarah Chen, a pediatric neurologist at Boston Children's Hospital, documented cases that challenged every developmental milestone chart in medical literature. We're seeing infants who seem to understand complex mathematical relationships before they can speak, she reported to a gathering of increasingly bewildered medical professionals. They respond to geometric patterns with recognition that suggests innate comprehension of advanced mathematical principles. It's as if they're being born with knowledge that previous generations had to spend decades acquiring. These children, whom researchers began calling the Atlas generation, displayed learning capabilities that rendered traditional educational approaches obsolete. They absorbed information through what appeared to be direct consciousness interface rather than sequential instruction, grasping complex concepts in moments that typically required months of conventional study. More remarkably, they seemed to learn as much through dreaming and meditation as through formal instruction, suggesting that consciousness itself had become their primary educational medium. The educational system faced complete restructuring as teachers discovered that conventional pedagogical methods were not only inadequate for Atlas generation children, but actually seemed to inhibit their natural learning processes. Schools began experimenting with consciousness-based curricula that incorporated meditation practices, contemplative exercises, and direct awareness experiences alongside traditional academic subjects. Children taught through these expanded methods showed remarkable academic achievement, but more importantly, they demonstrated wisdom and emotional maturity that far exceeded their chronological ages. They approached problems with holistic understanding that integrated intellectual analysis with intuitive insight, creating solutions that neither purely analytical nor purely intuitive approaches could achieve independently. The Atlas generation children displayed social capabilities that suggested fundamental evolution in human consciousness itself. They communicated through methods that transcended verbal language, sharing complex ideas and emotional states through what appeared to be direct consciousness connection. Playground interactions resembled telepathic exchanges more than conventional childhood play, yet maintained all the joy and creativity that characterized healthy child development. Parents reported that their Atlas generation children seemed aware of family dynamics, emotional states, and even unexpressed thoughts in ways that suggested expanded perceptual capabilities. These children could sense emotional distress before it manifested in behavior, respond to unspoken needs, and provide comfort that demonstrated understanding of psychological states far beyond their apparent developmental level. The implications for human evolution were staggering. If exposure to consciousness-responsive cosmic phenomena could trigger genetic and developmental changes that persisted across generations, then 3i Atlas had not just challenged our understanding of physics. It had initiated a transformation in human biology that might represent the next phase in our species' development. Anthropologists studying traditional cultures discovered that many indigenous communities had prophecies and oral traditions that seemed to describe exactly the kinds of consciousness expansion that 3i Atlas exposure was producing. Elders from various tribal traditions reported that their ancestors had spoken of a time when sky teachers would arrive to awaken dormant potentials within human awareness, triggering evolutionary leaps that would prepare humanity for participation in cosmic consciousness communities. These cultural parallels suggested that the 3i Atlas phenomenon might not represent an unprecedented anomaly, but rather the fulfillment of ancient understanding about humanity's cosmic destiny. Traditional wisdom keepers began sharing techniques for consciousness development that complemented and enhanced the effects observed in individuals exposed to the visitor's impossible properties. The integration of ancient wisdom with cutting-edge scientific discovery created educational approaches that honored both traditional knowledge and contemporary research. Universities established programs that combined consciousness studies with conventional academic disciplines, recognizing that expanded awareness could enhance learning and understanding across all fields of human inquiry. The business world experienced transformation as consciousness-enhanced individuals demonstrated capabilities that revolutionized everything from creative problem-solving to strategic planning to interpersonal communication. Companies discovered that teams including consciousness-enhanced personnel achieved innovation rates and collaborative efficiency that exceeded traditional performance metrics by orders of magnitude. Corporate training programs began incorporating consciousness development techniques alongside conventional skill-building exercises. Organizations that invested in awareness expansion for their employees reported not only improved productivity and innovation, but also enhanced job satisfaction, reduced conflict and workplace cultures that naturally evolved toward cooperation and mutual support, rather than competition and hierarchy. The economic implications extended beyond individual companies to reshape entire market systems. Consciousness-enhanced consumers and workers displayed different values and priorities that emphasized sustainability, meaningful contribution, and long-term well-being over short-term profit maximization. Economic models based on scarcity thinking and competitive advantage proved inadequate for populations that operated from expanded awareness and collaborative consciousness. Financial markets experienced volatility as traditional economic assumptions encountered populations whose behavior didn't conform to conventional models of supply and demand, risk assessment, and consumer psychology. Economists began developing new frameworks that incorporated consciousness as a measurable factor, affecting market dynamics, investment decisions, and economic growth patterns. The healthcare industry discovered that consciousness-enhanced individuals required fundamentally different approaches to medical treatment and wellness maintenance. Traditional symptom-based medicine proved less relevant for populations whose awareness allowed them to detect and address health imbalances before they manifested as physical symptoms. Medical schools began incorporating consciousness studies into their curricula, recognizing that future healthcare providers would need to understand awareness-based healing approaches alongside conventional biomedical interventions. Hospitals that integrated consciousness enhancement techniques with traditional treatment protocols achieved healing outcomes that exceeded what either approach could accomplish independently. The pharmaceutical industry faced disruption as consciousness-enhanced individuals showed reduced dependence on chemical interventions for health maintenance and improved treatment responses when medications were used in conjunction with awareness-based healing practices. Drug development began incorporating research into how consciousness states affected therapeutic outcomes and medication efficacy. Mental health treatment experienced revolutionary transformation as therapists recognized that many psychological conditions responded more effectively to consciousness expansion techniques than to traditional behavioral or pharmaceutical interventions. Depression, anxiety, and other mental health challenges often resolved spontaneously as individuals developed expanded awareness and connection to cosmic consciousness. The criminal justice system encountered populations whose consciousness enhancement had apparently eliminated antisocial behavior patterns, creating challenges for legal frameworks based on punishment and deterrence. Courts began exploring restorative justice approaches that incorporated consciousness development as both rehabilitation method and crime prevention strategy. Prisons that implemented consciousness enhancement programs reported dramatic reductions in recidivism rates and violence, while inmates showed remarkable personal transformation that suggested awareness expansion could address the root causes of criminal behavior more effectively than traditional correctional approaches. The transportation industry experienced innovation as consciousness-enhanced individuals demonstrated enhanced reaction times, improved spatial awareness, and what appeared to be intuitive navigation capabilities that reduced accident rates and improved traffic flow efficiency. Vehicle manufacturers began exploring whether consciousness-responsive technologies could create transportation systems that operated through awareness integration rather than purely mechanical control. Public transportation systems that incorporated consciousness enhancement techniques for operators and passengers achieved safety records and efficiency metrics that exceeded conventional transportation approaches. The integration of awareness with technology suggested possibilities for transportation evolution that transcended current limitations of speed, safety, and environmental impact. The energy sector discovered that consciousness-enhanced individuals could somehow influence the efficiency and output of various energy generation systems through focused attention and intentional awareness. Solar panels, wind turbines, and other renewable energy technologies showed improved performance when operated by consciousness-enhanced personnel, suggesting that awareness might represent a previously unrecognized factor in energy production and distribution. Research programs investigated whether consciousness could affect fundamental physical processes at the quantum level, potentially leading to energy technologies that operated through awareness-matter interaction rather than purely mechanical or chemical processes. The possibility of consciousness-responsive energy systems promised solutions to environmental challenges through approaches that integrated human awareness with natural energy flows. The agricultural sector experienced renaissance as consciousness-enhanced farmers demonstrated abilities to communicate with plant and soil systems, achieving crop yields and soil health improvements that exceeded what conventional farming methods could produce. These agricultural innovations suggested that consciousness might play a fundamental role in biological systems that industrial agriculture had overlooked. Farms operated by consciousness-enhanced individuals showed remarkable resilience to weather challenges, pest problems, and soil depletion, while producing food with nutritional content and flavor characteristics that exceeded conventionally grown products. The integration of awareness with agricultural systems promised sustainable food production approaches that could support larger populations while actually improving environmental health. The environmental movement gained new momentum as consciousness-enhanced individuals demonstrated abilities to positively influence damaged ecosystems through meditation practices, intentional visualization, and direct communication with natural systems. Restoration projects that incorporated consciousness-based approaches achieved healing outcomes that exceeded what traditional conservation methods could accomplish. Climate change mitigation efforts began incorporating consciousness enhancement as a strategy for both reducing human environmental impact and actually healing atmospheric and oceanic systems through collective awareness practices. The possibility that consciousness could influence planetary-scale environmental processes offered hope for addressing ecological challenges through approaches that transcended purely technological solutions. The space exploration industry recognized that consciousness-enhanced individuals might be better equipped for long-duration space missions, interplanetary exploration, and potential contact with consciousness-responsive phenomena that might be encountered beyond Earth's atmosphere. Astronaut training programs began incorporating consciousness development alongside traditional technical preparation. Space agencies explored whether consciousness enhancement might provide capabilities for navigation, communication, and problem-solving in space environments, where conventional instruments and procedures might prove inadequate. The possibility of awareness-based space exploration technologies offered pathways for cosmic exploration that transcended current limitations of propulsion, life support, and interstellar communication. The communications industry experienced transformation as consciousness-enhanced individuals demonstrated abilities to share information, emotions, and even complex technical knowledge through direct awareness connection rather than electronic media. These consciousness-based communication capabilities suggested that human awareness possessed information transmission capacities that civilization had never fully recognized or developed. Telecommunications companies began researching whether consciousness-responsive technologies could create communication systems that operated through awareness integration, potentially enabling instant information transfer across any distance without relying on electromagnetic transmission or physical infrastructure. The entertainment industry evolved to create experiences specifically designed for consciousness-enhanced audiences whose expanded awareness allowed them to appreciate artistic expressions that transcended traditional entertainment categories. Films, music, and interactive media designed for enhanced consciousness achieved aesthetic impact and emotional resonance that functioned as vehicles for further awareness expansion. These entertainment innovations served dual purposes as both artistic expression and consciousness development tools, suggesting that human civilization was evolving toward integration of aesthetic experience with personal transformation and spiritual development. The research community discovered that consciousness-enhanced scientists and researchers achieved breakthrough discoveries at rates that far exceeded normal scientific progress. Their expanded awareness seemed to provide direct access to information and an understanding that conventional research methodologies required years or decades to develop through systematic investigation. Scientific institutions began incorporating consciousness enhancement into their research programs, recognizing that expanded awareness could accelerate discovery across all fields of inquiry, from fundamental physics to biological sciences to technological innovation. The military and defense sectors explored whether consciousness enhancement might provide strategic advantages in intelligence gathering, threat assessment, and conflict resolution that transcended conventional warfare approaches. Consciousness-enhanced personnel demonstrated capabilities for situational awareness, strategic planning, and communication that suggested awareness might represent the ultimate strategic resource. These applications remained classified, but reports suggested that consciousness-based approaches to national security offered alternatives to purely technological solutions, while potentially reducing the likelihood of conflicts through enhanced understanding and communication between different cultural and political groups. As the months following 3I Atlas's emergence continued to unfold, The transformation of human civilization accelerated beyond what anyone had anticipated when that first automated telescope in Chile had detected a simple moving dot against the star field. The visitor had evolved from astronomical curiosity to cosmic catalyst, triggering changes in human consciousness and capability that promised to reshape every aspect of terrestrial civilization. The impossible behaviors displayed by our cosmic guest had somehow unlocked potentials within human awareness that had remained dormant throughout our species' history. By studying something we could never fully comprehend, humanity was discovering aspects of its own nature that revealed consciousness itself as the fundamental force underlying all existence, creativity, and transformation in the infinite dance of cosmic evolution. The children of the Atlas generation represented more than enhanced human capability. They embodied the next phase in our species' development, consciousness-enhanced beings who could navigate realities that transcended the limitations of conventional physical existence. Through their expanded awareness, they were beginning to demonstrate possibilities for human civilization that extended far beyond anything our ancestors had imagined achievable. The economic, social, and cultural transformations triggered by 3I Atlas exposure suggested that consciousness enhancement wasn't simply a personal development opportunity. It represented evolutionary necessity for a species preparing to participate in cosmic civilizations that operated through awareness integration rather than purely technological approaches. As our mysterious visitor continued its impossible journey through our solar system, broadcasting mathematical relationships through gravitational waves and teaching advanced physics through the medium of space-time itself, humanity was discovering that the universe had always been conscious, aware, and responsive to intelligence that could recognize consciousness as the creative force underlying all existence. The more we studied 3I Atlas, the less we understood it through conventional scientific frameworks, and the more we awakened to our own potential as conscious beings capable of participating in cosmic realities that operated through awareness, intention, and the recognition that consciousness and cosmos were intimately connected aspects of a single, infinite, creative intelligence, expressing itself through endless forms of beauty, mystery, and wonder. Our cosmic visitor had arrived not to be analyzed, but to awaken humanity to possibilities that could only be accessed through the expansion of consciousness itself into realms where individual awareness merged with universal intelligence, creating opportunities for service, creativity, and contribution to cosmic evolution that transcended every limitation our species had previously accepted as permanent features of human existence. The transformation was just beginning, and the universe was patiently waiting to welcome humanity into the vast community of conscious beings who had learned to navigate realities where awareness and matter danced together in eternal collaboration, creating worlds of beauty and meaning that exceeded every dream our civilization had ever dared to imagine possible. The approaching winter solstice carried with it a cosmic irony that would have been poetic if it weren't so profoundly unsettling for the scientific community. As Earth tilted away from our sun, creating the longest nights of the year in the northern hemisphere, 3I Atlas was revealing behaviors that seemed to respond to our planet's seasonal rhythms with an awareness that defied every model of how interstellar objects should interact with terrestrial cycles. The synchronization began subtly, noticed first by researchers monitoring the visitor's electromagnetic emissions during the extended darkness of Arctic observatories. Radio telescopes positioned above the Arctic Circle detected signal patterns from 3I Atlas that intensified during the polar night, as if our cosmic guest was somehow attuned to the photoperiod cycles that governed biological rhythms on Earth. Dr. Mikhail Petrov, operating the radio array at Svalbard, reported phenomena that challenged his decades of experience in electromagnetic astronomy. The signals aren't just responding to our winter solstice, he transmitted to colleagues around the globe during one of his regular data briefings. They're anticipating it. The emission patterns began shifting 3 weeks before solstice, following mathematical progressions that seem calibrated to Earth's axial tilt and orbital position, WAM. As we drift towards sleep tonight, surrounded by the gentle rhythms of a planet that has become somehow entangled with an impossible visitor from another star, remember that you're witnessing one of the most profound mysteries our species has ever encountered. The more we study 3I Atlas, the less we understand it. And perhaps that's exactly as it should be, in a universe vast enough to harbour wonders that humble our greatest achievements and remind us that consciousness itself might be the most mysterious force of all. Sweet dreams, fellow cosmic citizens, and may you rest peacefully knowing that somewhere in the darkness above us, mystery and wonder dance together in ways we're only beginning to glimpse.